Ladies and gentlemen, this is Mumber number 5. Hope everyone is doing fantastic today. We are live on both TikTok and YouTube, which is really exciting. Just checking if you guys are in chat, just making sure you can hear me properly because I'm doing some new stuff with my microphone. So let me know if it's not working. That being said, I'm here with Kay and with Tate, and we're going to kick off the live recording of episode number 50 of One with the Films. So Kay, when you're ready, bud, kick us off.
Absolutely, for number Big 5-0. All right, let's do it. Here we go. Hey there, all you existential hoes. Welcome back to the confessional, where we admit our deepest, darkest secrets for laughs and likes. So forgive me, Daddy, for I've been naughty. Pray in the name of the Bergman, the Gaffer, and the Holy Sydow, and join us for a conversation that for sure won't make you feel any semblance of existential dread. Now, let's talk about death, chess, and almost 8 seals. Now, but who are we? Why are we in a church, and why is there a body in the corner? Well, I'm Kay. The grocery store was booked, and you would like to know that, wouldn't you, you narc? I'm that foul-mouthed cherub, that chaotic neutral on a good day, terror of the night on a bad day, and I'm here to play some checkers. Well, checker, I hardly know her. And speaking of the devil, and though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, he comforts me, annoys me, and uses his rod to toy with me. I'm with the holiest of hoes, the broiest of moes, the coziest of toes. It's the naffiest of nafs, also known as On Second Thought. Hey, Naf, would you like to say hi, sire?
I would. I'm curious about this coziest of toes. Can we elaborate on that a little bit?
No, I'm not going to give you. I'm not going to give you the OnlyFans right now.
Nice.
Come on. Listen.
Okay, fine. Well, fun fact for viewers: the name has actually changed. It's seen by Naf now. It's not On Second Thought. Okay, it's a new.
You did name it.
We just got a lore drop.
You did.
We just got a lore drop.
Yeah, that's actually really rude. And so yeah, screw you. But no, I'm here. I'm excited. I'm pumped. Hi, it's me, Naf.
That is correct. That's my boy. That's my man. But he is not the only one with us here, because joining us is the noblest of film nerds. Our knight in shining onesies, the crusader of my heart and the invader of my feed, the keeper of the facts, the man with the thoughts, the master of chess with no less than a second guess. Oh, look, I made a mess. JK, that was just a test. It's Tate, also known as the facts guy. Here we are.
Thank you. The humblest of entrances. I appreciate it.
He is entering on his knees.
Is this? I'm always on my knees. That's the thing. People don't realize that I'm getting into character for this film. I'm getting need.
Gotta do it.
Getting ready to pray. Getting ready to study up.
Bro, on your knees for us. I like it, man. I like it.
On my
knees. Listen, Jim didn't do that.
Exactly.
And like
that's what you got for a prize. Just, one with the filmies.
Absolutely, my man's going all out this year. He was just, I think that my man was a little disappointed he didn't take home more gold last year. So he came, he did, my man did not come to play. I didn't know your game like that, and I'm ready for this.
We were not familiar with your game, but let me fill you.
We weren't familiar with your game.
A quick reminder to listeners that you can find One with the Films on your favorite podcasting platform of choice, as well as live and on demand right here. And if you're on a live chat, please feel free to join in the conversation. We always love to hear from you. And if you listen on demand, don't worry. We still love you.
Absolutely, we do. We absolutely love. I mean, come on. If you love us there, but I also understand people are busy, the kind of things there. But you could have made time for us. You could have done it. Exactly.
Think of me as like
I'm glad that we're on the same page.
Mother. I'm like a narcissistic mother, and it's like I don't want to have to ask you to do the dishes. I want you to want to do it. Okay.
Exactly.
That's it.
Exactly. And I'm like my narcissistic mother, dead. So it's but
okay, that actually leads into death, which is a big part of
she was actually kind of lovely, but nonetheless, and
portrayed wonderfully in this film.
And portrayed wonderfully.
All right, we might as well start drinking now. We got that point.
Hey, gotta go.
We're here, baby.
Now that being said, Naf, why don't you tell us a little bit more about what we're doing today while Tate and I take a drink?
Well, I will do. What we're doing today is an episode of the Weekly Watch List, and that is what happens when a bunch of friends with unique and wonderful taste in films have tried too hard for too long to finally share and discuss their favorite films with one another. So if you've been around for a while, you already know the shtick, but for the uninitiated, the idea is that for every episode, at least one person is watching the chosen film for the first time. So it's all about having a space for creators to share the art that matters most to them, and then give them a platform to show us all why. So if you guys like listening to a bunch of nerds geek out and force each other to watch and then discuss their favorite films for the very first time, feel free to follow or subscribe, and you can send us to your friends if you like, and you can also activate notifications so you never miss an episode. And of course, we're on all your favorite socials as well, so links are in the description below to check out all of our pages individually and for the one page too. Hell yeah, mate.
Absolutely. But with that said, Tate, you as our guest of the week.
It's me.
You've come. We did not, listen, we are here not to play around. So, Tate, what's a brilliant film that not enough people have seen?
Not a lot of people want to run the clock back. They always look into the future. They want to see what's next. They want to see all these conventions.
Avengers Doomsday, here we go.
Exactly. That's what they're looking for. In fact, people need to lock in, study up, and run it back. Because people need to check out the Seventh Seal. People need to check out the Seventh Seal. First of all, it's perfect for the TikTok generation. It's a tight 90. It's quick. It's so perfect for this generation. You could have Subway Surfers running on the side of it, and that would only just make it even easier to digest. It's a small nugget. Second, this is a generation of thinkers. This is a generation that wants to discuss things, sometimes, maybe. It's a philosophical odyssey. It's a journey. It's perfect for people. It's perfect, and it's such a good casual film. Anyone can jump into it. It's easy. It's the simplest premise, and that's my third point as well. Fun little premises that send you on big journeys. A guy playing chess with death. That's a fun concept. That's a fun pickup line. That's something you should tell me in the elevator. That's something that Keegan would tell me at 2 a.m. at the club when he's pulled me aside because I have my head in a bush trying to make sure I make it through the night. He would say that, and I would be all in for another round.
I would absolutely be next to you just saying, hey, man, you're playing chess with death. Just going, that's what we're here to do tonight.
I love that pitch for the film. I know when I had reached out to you and said, hey, we're going to bring you back. We want you to bring one of your own films this time. What would you pick? And you had said The Seventh Seal. And I was like, what's that? And you literally said, a knight plays chess with death. And I was like, yeah, cool, I'm in. Like, I think I'm going to grab the screen. It literally was like, yes.
It's the perfect elevator pitch.
It's it's the easiest thing to get past everybody there. It's incredible. And so, Naf, going off of that, how much did you know about this film going in?
Well, as we just mentioned, Tate mentioned the name, and I had to ask, what is it? So, like most of the films that we get to check out here, and again, my fucking favorite thing about doing this, I don't know this stuff exists beforehand. And the fact that it can come from somebody and it can mean so much to them and like prompt that discussion, that's why we do this, baby. So I knew nothing going in. I checked out not much either beyond Tate's pitch. Ken says chess played against himself. What? Is death. But yeah, dude, I saw the name Max von Sydow. I had only known him from some of his later works, a cute little cameo in The Force Awakens. And I think he ended up in the last season of Game of Thrones as well, playing the three-eyed raven for a minute. And
Minority Report.
Oh, yeah, he was in Minority Report. Yeah. That was
my man.
And yeah, so that was me going in, very, very little, if nothing.
Yeah.
What about you, Kate?
Yeah.
What was your kind
of... eagle-eyed viewers will remember from our Me, Earl, and the Dying Girl podcast, I talked about how that film mentioned several big, kind of, I guess, more obscure foreign films that really meant a lot to the director of that film. This was parodied in that movie. Now, I was in high school. I was like, what the fuck is this movie? I don't get this reference. But that was kind of what I loved about part of that film, which was I was learning about films that I had never even heard of. And this was always one of those. And I always loved that concept of, you know, a man playing chess with death. And so for a while, it just had always been on the list, but I just had never gotten around to it. And when I, even funny thing, last year, I started to develop a revolution in a script I'm already writing. And I was thinking about the Seventh Seal when I was coming up with that, just based on the premise alone. And then when we were at DiadCon and I heard Tate talking about how, oh yeah, I'm gonna bring Seventh Seal, I was like, oh shit, okay, so I'm not gonna watch it now. I'll just wait. And and it was so worth the wait. So that was how I heard about it. But Tate, you brought this here.
I did.
How the fuck did this come into your life? How did this movie come into your life? What did that mean to you? Like, bring us back.
Okay, let's again. Hashtag run it back. We're gonna dial the clock back.
Let's go, bro.
Dialing that clock back.
It was like 2019, 2020 when I really started to like want to watch more movies and just see as many things as I can see. Seventh Seal is something that's so embedded in pop culture as well. Like you said, it's in Meal and Dying Girl. I think it's been parodied in The Simpsons. And if you know Bill and Ted, death in the movie is, you know, it's quite literally a characterization of death from this film. Like that's the whole intent. I think when something has that much influence and presence in pop culture, that means it's really reverberated. So I was looking around to see what things would be interesting to watch. I'd watched Bill and Ted, and I thought that was amazing. That's one of my favorite movies as well. And then back in the day, I used to always go, and still to this day, I go on IMDb afterwards and look at all the trivia because I like to look at all the little facts about it and the craft. And they said, oh yeah, death was inspired by the Seventh Seal. I'm like, okay, what's that about? So I Googled it and then it was like, oh, type 90, awesome. That means I can get through it quick and easy. Even better, the entire film is on YouTube for some reason. So I was like, well, that's perfect. I can watch it on the bus to uni. I can do this, I can do that. And from there, I just watched it based off the premise alone. Me just reading up, okay, well, what is this actually about? And then a knight plays chess with death. Then the opening 10 minutes happened and I was on a journey. So for me, it's that simple pleasure of having an intriguing idea and being like, oh, okay, how does that play out? It's like fishing. The bait, the perfect idea can suck you into any movie, regardless of the language or the context or the presence of whatever. The perfect hook can get you in. And that for me was the Seventh Seal. That was fantastic. And then I watched it again, quick and easy, and it was amazing. I was like,
How many
something.
times would you say you've seen this now?
I've seen it twice now. I very rarely rewatch things just because of time, and I'd rather watch newer things. But that is one that I actually revisited again because it was more of a language thing as well that I wanted to kind of go over and make sure I understood everything, but also just to kind of like catch all the beats that they were doing. And in isolation, I've watched many clips from the films, like my favorite moments with Antonius as well. So just those I've watched. The speech he gives in the church, I've watched about 100 times. That's one of my favorite scenes ever. So I've seen it in isolation multiple times, but only twice on a full watch, I must say. A tourist, I know.
A tourist. You beat both of us. So like,
but I think it's also very telling of like how impactful a film can be. That this can be like the one that you go, this is the one I need to show you, and I've seen it twice in my life, but I know that I need to show you. So that I think that's one of the things that makes it a great pick today, dude. So yeah.
I mean, I think that there are a lot of films that we have in our lives that are like that, where it's like I've seen it the one time, but that was enough for it to solidify. I do think that films either go by the one watch or the like third watch, because it's like for me, I'm like between those numbers, that's the solid like because like 3 times you've had it like okay, it worked for me really well once. Second time is gonna probably more than likely bring it down a couple of notches because it's like no longer with that, but third time kind of sets it at that right time. But with that said, I guess, well, Tate, obviously thank you for that. And then with, you know, we're really gonna dive into this.
I can do some fun facts for you.
Yes, you know, that'd be a great thing. Why don't you get into those fun facts?
Do you remember last time we had to make sure and assess when I was here how fun these are? So
that's true. That's true. We got to bring that, like you said, we're winding it back. We gotta like, you know, running it back. Run it back. Sorry, I'm not up on the lingo. So
reading over my fun facts in advance here, I'm realizing that these will not be fun at all. Gathering that it's a film about, you know, coming to terms with death.
So do it in a funny voice.
I think it could still be fun. It'll be fun and like an entertainment level.
In the words of American Fiction, it's like he's funny, and it's not that funny. It's like funny in a sad way. Like, you know,
I'll do it without knowing anything else myself. Aha! Opening in Sweden. No, I'm not going to do that.
Copyright strike. Copyright strike. The
D23
cycles are out
You
right
gotta
now.
understand.
You don't get
The
it.
director needed to fix his crippling fear of death. Haha! I got you guys. I got you.
Captain America 4 sounds great.
Dude,
Hey man, listen, gotta love it.
All right, I got you guys.
Got
So,
it. Harrison Ford selling out again.
classic.
No.
All right, so opening in Sweden on the 16th of February 1957 and adapted from Wood Painting, a play that was written by Ingmar Bergman for his acting students to practice before making its way first to the radio for radio theater and then to the stage before finally making its way to the screen as the 17th film by the renowned writer-director. On a budget of 150,000 USD, it filmed for 30 days and it grossed 311,000 USD worldwide. It was nominated for the Palme d'Or at Cannes and tied for the jury special prize with another film titled Canal that released the same year. It stars Max von Sydow and Bengt Ekerot and was integral in helping writer-director Ingmar Bergman overcome his crippling fear of death. He's actually gone on record to say that of his 50-plus films, this is one of his personal rare favorites, and the film was actually even recognized by the Vatican in the values category of its list of 45 great films. It was also submitted by Sweden as the official pick for Best Foreign Language Film at the 30th Academy Awards. It's currently sitting at a 4.3 out of 5 on Letterboxd, and it's number 90 on the top 250 narrative feature films list in terms of the highest rated. And on IMDb, it sits at a lovely 8.1 out of 10 and is the 215th highest rated film on the platform. Y'all have anything you want to add to that?
That was fun. That was fun. I think
that was
fun.
fun.
That was really fun.
Okay.
I now had to look up what the Vatican's 45 films were. Like, I literally just had to be like, what are the other 45?
Fast and Furious 10.
Sanctuary is number one.
That was a weird entry, but it is on here. It's
Sanctuary, 50 Shades of Grey.
It is odd. There is a West Side Story in here, and so no Last Jedi there. I apologize, but nonetheless. Don't check who added that to the Wikipedia page. But
I will say, I'm interested. I like the idea of the reconciliation that directors have with like having favorite movies, like directors who absolutely abstain from watching any of their films ever again or don't like to talk about them, versus directors who just like, yeah, I made this movie for me. I love this movie. That's why I make movies. Interesting that he had like rare favorites that he enjoyed compared to others where it's like, just kind of like make it for the craft. I make it for like the art. But this being something that he really connects with, that's pretty cool. That's quite fun.
Well, and I am interested to talk about the overcoming the fear of death, because I think that the way that they portray death in this movie is a very fascinating part of it. Yeah. And so, But going with that, before we go any further, all of these conversations are not spoiler free. We are not necessarily doing a play-by-play, but we are talking about the film with the expectation that you already have seen it. It's always cool to go and watch the film and then come back later. But even if you haven't seen the film, chances are we'll convince you to finally make that leap. And if you want to know what film to watch in advance, you can just come in, and so you can be prepared next week. Links are in the description to all of our socials, so you can check out there. We do a reveal game every week, so you can try to see if you can guess it. And then if you listen all the way to the end of today's episode, we'll be revealing our next film and guest right here, so you can get started. Think of this as like a book club, but for movies. So anyway,
and the guest next week is someone that we have really wanted to work with for a long time. They're fantastic.
I don't even know.
That's true.
I'm excited.
I'll be surprised.
Now you're excited.
Do I know this person? Could that be my clue?
I feel like in a way you do.
I know of
in a
them,
way,
maybe, but I don't know.
Possibly.
Okay.
I don't know if you know them on but I think on some sort of spiritual level you might.
I think the star-crossed lovers in another universe. That's what I'm saying.
Oh wow!
Yeah.
Okay, now I'm excited.
Absolutely,
Okay.
I know.
Absolutely.
When we were talking about,
they know you, by the way, and so, but yeah,
they know me.
Yeah, it's pretty awesome.
Is it the IRS?
Bro, sorry guys, we're gonna end the stream. We're gonna end the stream now.
Tom said, "Fuck shit, he ruined it." Everybody run! It's the tax man.
Yeah, but I know that when we were kind of laying out the kind of real important things that we wanted to get to in the film, the things we wanted to talk about, one of the things that stood out for you, Kay, was like Max von Sydow's performance. I'd love for you to kick us off there.
Oh, my man.
Oh, yeah.
Oh,
yeah.
Lars Anteca. Like, listen, like, here's the thing. Like, Max von Sydow was always like one of those interesting actors. I first saw him in Minority Report, which I had the pleasure of showing Naf when he came back here for his birthday. A great film. Another box on the Spielberg list checked. And so, but with that, Max von Sydow was always a very interesting actor to me, and I was always curious. And then I eventually found out that he was in this movie. And man, I thought the guy looked good old when he was young. Oh boy. And but I'll tell you, like, very few people can pull off a performance with this like kind of stoicism that you need.
The performance pulled you off.
And
sorry.
I understand.
Oh my God. The performance pulled you off. But nonetheless, the thing about Max von Sydow's performance in this film, I mean, you have to really go to the character, just what the character's trying to convey. This man who's grappling with the concept of death and the idea of like seeing death before him and trying to rectify, do something worthy of his life. Because, you know, this is a guy who's come back from the Crusades, come back and done all of this horrible shit and seen horrible shit and coming back and feeling that just genuine sense of, oh my God, I'm about to die and my life has sort of meant nothing. Yeah. And it's that sort of desire that he has to just kind of do that. We constantly see it. It's like that one last good deed. But I like that they don't make that his full thing. Like for a while, he's just trying to really, how do you put it? He's just trying to get to that next step, right? Like he's just trying to get to that next minute that he has. And I gotta just say, like his performance, his eyes, everything. Tate, I don't know if you feel about this, but it's like, what, like, did you like? It's like it's a very special performance, right? Like it's a very like thing there, and I'm curious to know your thoughts on overall, just like obviously his character and how it affected you, and you know going with that. But like I know it really hit me like a freight train.
No, absolutely, and it's one of those things I didn't really think about much because for whatever reason. But it's going more into it and thinking about it now, it's like I have an insane fear of death, an insane fear of death. I can't fathom it. I can't process that there's a thing. I have like existential crises all the time. I'm like, one day I'm going to close my eyes and I'm not going to open them again. It frightens the fuck out of me. So it's interesting for me, this film, and the way that it kind of approached the topic. Reconciliation. He seeks reconciliation. He seeks understanding. He seeks context as well. He turns to every possible avenue to find that. And with the performance, and he is my favorite character in the film. He is the vehicle of this film, and very much the vehicle of all the themes and the message of what it's trying to say, and the conversation that the film is trying to start. The fact that he's turning to the church, he's talking to the supposed priest about his worries and his qualms and his frustrations. He talks to the woman that's about to get killed, and he's like, okay, well, present Satan before me, and he can stake his claim because I need to understand what's going on. The performance is so raw and it's so genuine, which I think is what you would need to get that kind of across, that kind of uncertainty and that anxiousness and that genuine dread. But at the same time, the way in which he begins to carry himself across the course of the film, even though he's still going on this journey, even though he still doesn't have the answers he seeks, he has that clarity of purpose and that clarity of who he wants to be in his final moments. And I found that his performance he becomes very elegant, it's like a flower. He treats those around him who are good and who are whole, he treats them well, he treats them fair. And there's a tenderness as well, as raw as he is in his feelings and his frustrations. There's a tenderness and a sweetness to the way he carries himself around the kind people. Now there's ruffians and there's some scallywags for sure, but there's kind of that beauty of oscillating between those two kind of like dynamics and those energies that is mastered so well in that character.
Oh yeah. Well,
I think that one of the things that blows my mind.
Tell us your thoughts.
Yeah, sure. So one of the things that blew my mind a lot as well is naturally we're watching this film in a different language, yeah, and it's you're reading the dialogue, and so it can be really easy to or really difficult to connect with people sometimes in that sense. You know, you watch something in a different language, it's like it's hard. The dialogue is so like intense and so like gripping and so like devoid of any like fluff that you really do feel the weight of what he's saying. One of my favorite lines I pulled up here is one of the first things he says, you know, like I love the introduction of death. We've got the opening kind of what's it called, voiceover or the Star Wars crawl. And you've just got the calm, you know, and everything is just so calm and he's just chilling and death is just there. Like he's just there. There isn't any kind of loud, like, bah, just kind of, it's not a jump scare. It's just 1 minute he's not there and the next minute he is. And seeing how Max von Sydow like kind of projects that fear in his face, because it's like instantly he asks, "Who are you?" But I feel like he knows. And I love the line where he says, "Have you come for me?" And Death says, "I've long walked by your side." And Antonius Block says, "Sir, I have noticed." Death says, "Are you ready?" And he says, "My body is ready, but I am not." And I love that line. It's like, I've been on the Crusades for 10 years. I am tired. I feel I feel like as those people would go on the Crusades, they're going for their God. Yeah, we're going to save these demons by bringing them good old fashioned Christianity. And I feel like at the point that we meet Antonius in this film, he is disillusioned with that idea. You know, like when he goes to the church and he says, "My heart is void. The void is a mirror. I see my face and feel loathing and horror." He's talking to what he thinks is a priest and going, "I want help. I want to believe in God. I want to believe that what I did had a purpose, had meaning, but I don't." And it's gripping. He's like fighting with that internal struggle of like, what have I done? Did it have meaning? And if it didn't, then like, has it all been a waste? Like, where is my meaning going to come from? And I think that ties into what you were saying before, Tate, about how he kind of starts in this place, which we've just talked about. And as the film kind of progresses, we see more and more of this character in Antonius Block, and particularly as he meets there was the girl that was burnt at the stake, the witch, and like, don't touch her. And he's just talking with her. I think it seems like a parallel to like Jesus and the sex worker that he did come across, you know, where he was like, "Don't touch her," and he's just like, no, she's welcome into the kingdom. Like he's very much, what's the word? Like he's showing what the ideal kind of, you know, Christian mentality is, and then you've got the other half of it, which we'll get into, you know, where people are like whipping themselves and like, I am sinful and I need to kind of repent in this way.
Yeah, well, one scene, before we get too far off of Max von Sydow, like one scene I really wanted to talk about as well that really hit me was, yes, the confessional was perfect. As you said, great fucking scene. Incredible scene. But the scene that got me was when he sees his wife for the first time in so long. And it's that moment where it's like, I heard you were coming home. And it was like everyone else left because of the plague. And here she is in this, you know, dark, empty castle, just chucking, you know, logs into the fire, just being like, yep, I heard you were coming home. And just seeing his face and just seeing how tired he is. But how like, it's the perfect Kushlov effect with the editing of just seeing him just being there with her, and just his face tells the whole story. Yeah. And it's like it's like you don't even need the dialogue, you don't need anything. It's like every one of us can relate to that feeling. And it's just, and it comes that. Oh, go ahead.
I was going to say that it comes on the back of the previous scene, is the kind of like, or just a little bit earlier, you have the kind of the last sequence of death with chess, and his entire what's the word, like the first game he feels like confident, I can beat him. And then kind of, not the first game, but the first part of the game. In the middle, after the church scene and that kind of reveal that he wasn't talking to a priest, he's now on the back foot. And then in the last one, he's like, there's a bit of that. He knows he's going to lose, but he knows why he's playing now. And you can see how different it is, where he's sitting back and he's just like, yep. And he's like, I'm going to have you in check. He's like, yep. And at that point, you've got the other family that's kind of like getting away, which also...
Like he knows... Oh, go ahead. Yeah.
It's so cool where I can't remember his name, the like jester dude, but him and his wife, Mia was her name, and he can see Antonius playing chess with death, and she can't see it. He's got this kind of, he can see that he's got these visions.
Yeah, and he's close.
His performance there is phenomenal too. That kind of like, no, we need to go like now. This is a bad place to be. And Antonius seeing them kind of disappear and going like, okay, I did something. I saved someone. And there's also a scene a little bit earlier too, where he's talking with them and he goes, I didn't really believe in love and life and all this kind of stuff. And I see you guys and it makes me like happy. It gives me hope. It's something along those lines. Like he sees that, like kind of, I guess love exists and it's important to preserve life, you know, at any cost.
God, it's such a beautiful moment. And again, as you're saying, that's I think why him seeing his wife, it's like he knows that death is coming for them. He knows that it's not that far away, and he knows that like it's gonna happen. So it's like that moment of almost like I'm coming back to you because I need to see you because I love you. I feel that, but I'm also a little sorry because I know what I'm also bringing with me.
Yeah.
And it's like because that's why it's like in his eyes you feel that like I'm happy to see you, but I know it's not going to be for very long.
Yeah, and it's the kind of wish fulfillment thing when people often muse about death and dying. It's like, you know, the hypotheticals that people post, like, oh, if you had 24 hours left, what would you do? Who would you see? Like, what would you say? It's the true. It goes from playing the game of chess to preserve himself, for like playing the game to like have those final moments and have those bits where you can kind of make peace and do good, making quality of the time that you have versus making more time for yourself. It's a full circle journey. It's truly beautiful by the end of it.
It is interesting. And Naf, I know that you also had mentioned to me off mic how much the character of Jons, the squire, really affected you, and I'm curious to know like more of your thoughts on that because he affected me too.
And Ken has asked a question in chat too, which we should come back to in just a second. But I think that one of the things that I really like about Jons is how like his character kind of like it's like juxtaposes Antonius a little bit, where you've got somebody who's going, I'm a little disillusioned, but I want the answers, I want the knowledge, who can help me? And Jons is kind of like, no, I just see life for what it is, you know? He's very, what's the word? Nihilistic, I suppose. That he's just kind of, I see it for what it is. Like, lady, I could have done this to you. You owe me your life. Like, that's just how it is. And it's, I think, really powerful watching how both of them react to similar like moments, particularly as they're watching the witch be burned at the stake. I think that stood out to me a lot, but particularly a lot of his dialogue against how Antonius views the world, I thought was really interesting. But like, what about for you, Tate? Like, Jons the squire. One question for you, actually. At the start of the film, they're walking on their little horses, and he's singing, and they find someone who's going to take them to the inn. And Jons goes over to speak to this person who's lying there, and as he turns it around, that person is deceased. When he goes back to Antonius, and Antonius asks him these questions about it, he doesn't tell him the guy was dead. He has a very different kind of conversation. But he's like, oh, no, he was fine. He was a smart guy. He didn't really tell me much. But he doesn't relay to Antonius at all that this person's dead. Why do you think that is? What do you think it means?
I think it's kind of the hubris of youth, right? In a sense. So it's not it's the hubris and the ignorance. Like, I mean, I turned 25 a couple of days ago, right? So I remember I was telling my parents, like, I remember
Happy birthday, by the way.
Yeah, thank you. I remember when I was a kid, like I used to think, oh my gosh, one day I'm gonna learn to drive a car. Like that's crazy. Like one day I'm gonna like kiss a girl and like get a job. Oh my goodness, that's so far away. And now I'm 25 and I have existential crises all the time. And I'm like, oh my God, I'm 25. Death is
Quarter life
around the
crisis,
corner.
baby.
Oh my gosh. Yeah, it's all the things you don't think about as a kid because you don't need to. You're not like affected by it. It's not on your radar. You don't dial into any of that noise because you can't. You're not there yet. But so much of the way you respond to things is informed by experience. For these youngsters, especially the squire in this movie, he doesn't have much experience. He's gone on the war and he's done his crusade and he's done his whole stuff. But he doesn't have the experience as Antonius. He doesn't have that like lived history. He doesn't know much of the life before. He doesn't have all that prior context. So for all the things that for him are trivial and it's just this, it's not worth mentioning. To Antonius, it's much more serious. It's a whole different game. For him, it's like, oh yeah, just another dead body. You know, he's on the Crusades. There's been a plague. You know, it's like, it's another dead body. But why even acknowledge it? But for Antonius, who sees the world as more holistic, and he had his true sense of faith that was really challenged on this journey. That's something he would take much more of a standing to at least in my reading of the character. In that situation, I feel like he would be like, well, this is a life, you know, this is something worth acknowledging. I feel like he would be like, let's bury him, let's say some rites, let's acknowledge. It's the interplay between youthful ignorance versus like those older than us who are more wiser, more tuned into the world with more context. They can respond to things in different ways. And I think it's definitely a case of the older you get, the more you mature in your point of view of the world and the way you respond to things. Like, I mean, you look at the news now, it's, I won't bring up too many examples, but we play the news in our house in the evenings, and the most horrible things are said about everything that's going on in the world. And for my little sister, it's like, that's just what she hears on the news. It's just what she hears on the news. But then I hear stories on the news and I'm sitting there and I'm like, I'm gutted. I want to turn it off. I can't like fathom listening to any more of it. But for her, it's just the news.
Yeah.
It's all the context and experience and lived history that you have that really changes the way that you respond to things. At least that's how I would read the scene.
Yeah, I'm very inclined to agree with you as well.
I have actually. Go ahead.
No, tell me, Kay, because I know that as we were saying, Jons was also one that like really stood out to you, and I want to know your read on him as a character.
Yeah, one thing I have the Wikipedia page pulled up, and one of the things that they have is, I guess, I know exactly the author of all great works, but nonetheless, there was actually like a really interesting quote that I guess some sort of reviewer talked about Seventh Seal, especially the Squire, and I really liked what was said here, which is, like the gravedigger in Hamlet, the Squire treats death as a bitter and hopeless joke. Since we all play chess with death, and since we all must suffer through that hopeless joke, the only question about the game is how long it will last and how well we will play it. To play it well, to live, is to love, and not to hate the body and the mortal, as the church urges in Bergman's metaphor. And I think that there is something to be said about what I like about Jons is, and not to compare this to so many different things, but it was what stood out to me was I did a production of Man of La Mancha, and which is based on the story of Don Quixote, for those who don't know. But one of the parts of that was, Don Quixote is this sort of basically this guy who thinks he's a knight. He lives in not medieval times, but he believes he's a knight. And everyone else is like fully aware this man is not a knight, but he's saying to everyone, "I'm a knight." But he has a patsy with him, and this guy fully knows that he's not a knight. That guy's not a knight, and he's not a squire. But he follows the guy,
giving like
because he
Island.
likes him. Yeah, but it's like, but he follows him because he likes him, and he thinks that the guy actually has some points, and what I like about Jons is it's very interesting because it's like, how are these two guys friends? Because Jons is very much as you said, the cynical kind of guy, but I would even hesitate to go with cynical because he is much more of a as you said, like a nihilist. I think he just kind of is a realist. I think he just sort of takes things as face value rather than having a pessimistic view or things like that. He just has seen death. He's seen his crusades. He doesn't agree with what the church has done. He doesn't agree with why they were over there. He doesn't think that there's a God. He doesn't think that there's any of this shit. And but I think that he just has this laissez-faire way of presenting everything that I found really appealing, because he also has that great scene with the painter in that chapel. And that was when I really fell in love with his character, because he's honestly asking questions.
Yeah.
Sure, he has a sarcastic remark, but he genuinely is having this conversation with the guy.
Yeah, and I love that he asks
I think that that's very interesting.
Yeah, he asks him those questions like, why are you painting this? Like, this is going to make people feel like horrible. Like why do this? And the guy's like, well, is what it is. But I think that it's very much to like Tate's point that I think it makes a lot of sense that this person's just lived through all of this so much. Maybe hasn't had a life outside of this. The plague is happening right now, as we said, that it makes a lot of sense that he'd be, what's the word? Like, just, what's the word? But like he's familiar with it, you know. Like it's not something that's shocking to him anymore. It just is. And so many of his lines speak at that. Like there's another one here where he says, "Love is as contagious as a cold. It eats away at your strength, morale. If everything's imperfect in this world, love is perfect in its imperfection." It's like that's on both sides of it, you know. It's like very realistic. Like this is gonna destroy you, but that's kind of like okay as well.
There was a line from that scene. It wasn't his, but it was a line that said, it was kind of talking about how like I think it came from the painter, and he's like, oh yeah, for like, because he's like, people won't want to look at this, and he's like, oh by hell they will. The skull is almost as interesting as a naked woman. And it's like, that's and I was like, that's so interesting, because he's right. So much of us will look at like death and darkness, and there is an allure, whether it is Tate, as you're saying, like out of fear, and we'll go, oh, I don't want that, but it's like, but there is we're all looking at the car crash we passed by. We're all looking at these things that it's like, there is a morbid fascination with death.
Exactly.
That I think is somewhat like explored in the film, which is like, you have, you know, Max von Sydow playing chess with death in kind of an almost intellectual curiosity way of I'm facing sort of my fear with it. But then you have the ones that are flogging themselves. And I think that the guy is just on this standpoint of like, he's just kind of in the middle on it all. It's like, it's gonna happen. I'm just gonna do whatever the fuck I want until then.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's the case as well. Art is meant to, you know, incite thought and incite introspection. But for Jons's nihilism, it's nihilism. It's almost like, again, youthful ignorance with like the hand waving. It's like, yep, it's shit, it's crap, it's this, it's that. He doesn't take the time to be introspective and think about these things in contemplative ways. You think about that scene, Jons comes in, he sees the painter, and he's painting his mural, and he's like, oh, he's asking questions, but he's like, it's kind of whatever. Versus Antonius, who goes into the church and he has his confessional where he's inquiring, he's asking, he wants to speak in confidence and know and inform his context. It's the dynamic between the two which makes it so fascinating. And like you said, Keegan, they can coexist and they end up being friends somehow, even though they're so differing in the way they see the world. Yet it's like the opposites attract, but from like a completely different perspective. The way that they engage and see with the world. I don't think there's either way has their pros and cons. I don't think there's a right or wrong way. There's just everything exists in context, and the context of what's informed these two men at their points in their lives. It kind of shows this almost the start of Bergman's journey with his acceptance versus the present and how he's reconciled that journey, the beginning and the end of that.
I think there's a really great scene.
Go ahead. Yeah.
There's a really great scene with Jons as well, where he goes into the empty house and then he kind of hides because he sees like someone's in here, and it turns out that there's a person who's robbing the houses, and he's, you know, about to like hurt this girl, and he says, why are you surprised? Like, I rob houses. And what blew my mind was the connection that when he looks at this guy, he's like, I know you, like you're the one who like sent me on this, and you knew that it was like fruitless and it was pointless and that it meant like nothing. And the guy's like, yep. At the time, though, I thought I was right. He's like, yeah, but now you know better. And like next time I see you, this is what I'm going to do to you. I'm going to leave you that mark of like a criminal. That stuff was like really, really powerful. And I want to get to Ken's question as well, because he'd asked, can we talk about how chess itself is used a lot as a story tool in film, and how well was the game used in this particular story? What are you guys' thoughts on that?
Oh,
okay.
Do you know other instances in which chess was used in like a film?
No, I mean, you have like Queen's Gambit.
Yeah.
I mean, obviously, like Queen's Gambit is all about chess. And then you have like, there was, The Wire. The Wire has an incredible chess scene. Because they use chess as a metaphor to explain how the drug trade works.
Oh yeah,
and how because it's actually how, like, he's saying we're all the pawns, and maybe you get to be queen. Like, but until then, you're just the pawns. Yeah, and it's like, and it's a great scene. But I think chess is just one of those, because it requires such strategy. But I think chess is a game. But I think it's also just like, it's a game that is widely enough known by the world that has very particular, almost theatrical pieces that we all kind of know how to play to some degree. There is just something that I think it's one of those universal-ish games enough that I think it lends itself to such drama. And it lends itself because it's not a game based on luck. It's a game based purely on strategy. Yeah. But it's a game that is so well, like, because it's like, you can't do it necessarily with Risk, because Risk is like, it's such a complicated game. And it's like, chess is simple enough to convey in film.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's the case of like,
what do you think?
Chess is, I mean, it's so, like you said, it's so universal. It's like in our language, it's in our like colloquialisms. It permeates everywhere in our society. In some like cases, it's visually attractive. You got the pieces; they're all unique. It's fun to look at. I don't know if you guys have ever watched like a professional chess match. They're pretty cool the way they like tap the timers and everything.
Yeah.
Chess is fucking boring to watch. because all of the struggle and the strategy and the internal aspects are in here. It's not a game you vocalize. It's not a game where it's like blackjack, like hit, draw, like split. It's not a verbal thing. It's all internal. So by that means, when you use it in film and you pair it with ideological struggles or debates, like it's turning on the casual brain a bit. I think of X-Men, the original X-Men, where they have Professor X and Magneto play chess. It's like
that's a great one. Yeah.
So it's like you get the visual like idea of like chess, like moves, thinking, and trying to outsmart each other in the debates, in the discussion. You get the players, so you get the visual paired with the verbal and the actual discussion itself. It makes for quite an entertaining thing. People can appreciate the strategy of the game as well as the strategy of the argument, and it makes it a lot more enticing. I think it also appeals to the kind of like winner mindset that we have. I mean, no one likes to lose an argument. No one likes to lose a debate. So I think when we watch debates and we watch discussions, we're always kind of on our seat to see like, ooh, who's going to be the winning one? So it just adds to the overall like intensity of the scene. Like again, when he's playing at the beginning of the game, he's playing for his life. He's like, fuck, like you could see almost like pull out the phone and be like, how to play chess 101.
How to Queen's Gambit.
Yeah, exactly. He's pulling up his Netflix, like he's stressing. And then again, by the end, he's more relaxed and he's laissez-faire and he's like, yep, I'm doing it for whatever for my reasons, and he's more relaxed. But again, it's the tension. It's that tension, which I think it's a really good tool. And I would love to actually think and hear from you, Naf, and maybe if Ken has any off the top of his brain, what films they've been used in really well. Because I can only think of X-Men, honestly.
It's funny. I was thinking about this before, right? And there's a film that I watched this year that isn't about chess. It's about a different sport entirely. But I feel like every time I've recommended it to people, it'd be like, this isn't a film about tennis or threesomes. It's a film about like chess. And like Challenges that came out this year by Luca Guadagnino. Like, it's funny that it gets you in the seat based on its trailer for a completely different reason. And I knew why I was going to see that movie. And I sat down, I got a completely different experience. And I was like, I like this more than what I wanted to see. But it's like watching, it's a strategy, right? It's like at a certain point, each person has their own game that they're playing, their own game of chess while trying to kind of be within the others. And you're always kind of wondering within that film. And it also touches on exactly what you said. It's like building tension in the game and in the strategy. As opposed to you don't have to sit and go and whoosh in chat says they were wondering when challenges was going to be mentioned. So yeah, and also a couple of other messages in chat. So you got some birthday wishes there, Tate. Welcome to your quarter life crisis, Young says.
Thank you.
And Ken had also said
Here we
that
are.
Ken had said that Don Quixote is a story that not many people talk about anymore. So props to you, Kay, knowing your shit.
Yeah.
But Young had also mentioned that it wasn't exactly chess, but mahjong in Crazy Rich Asians and how that's used in their story. Which I remember, dude, it's like an integral part of the story there. You got a main character that comes to the end and is like, all right, I'm going to like fight this person and prove to myself that like I am like enough, you know, like I know what's happening. And yeah, I think that like those are a couple that stand out to me. But Kay, before we move on to like a little bit more about like the craft of the film, do you have any other thoughts of like chess and film?
Let me think. Like, honestly, like I think that we've kind of covered at least all the ones that are in my head. I'm sure we'll think of like, I'm sure we'll think of like so many others like the minute we stop talking about it.
Yeah,
but
Ken had mentioned Sherlock Holmes' Game of Shadows, the mind game of chess, helps convey how one uses their mind, not just the pieces. That's pretty cool.
I do think that I think it's also more the concept of chess. Like I think it's like as Ken is talking about, like it's very much this kind of, it's always we talk about like playing mental chess with the another person. It's like it is that. I think it's because it always is like one move you, one move me, and it's like trying to outthink the other person. You're trying to lure them in, and it's like I think it's a constant game of back and forth, and I think that's why it works, because it is so strategy oriented and it requires so much like understanding of the partner within a finite amount of moves that could possibly be made.
I think there's something else that comes to mind as well, is the thought that for a lot of like moves or strategies, like you have to be willing to let certain pieces die or be captured. Depending on your point of view of how the game works. And I feel like that is also like indicative of like some of the themes for the film too, where it's like to win, like his strategy, which is to like, he knows he's going to die. I want to get back to my wife and see her one last time. And I want to let these people get away. Like that's the big game. To win or to kind of get there, he has to be willing to let pieces die, namely like himself. Yeah. Like it's like, I have to here and lose and take him with me, and this is going to end potentially horribly for all of us, but yeah, like I think that aspect of it is really cool too.
Oh yeah, and it's just such an interesting question, the whole like over the whole thing. But yeah, like I guess kind of going away from that a bit, I know Tate, you were very captured with how you mentioned at the beginning, this film is only an hour and 20 minutes.
Yeah.
And like how much story, like a whole, as we said, like a thesis worthy of like, religious thought and philosophy poured into, and it's tight, it's crisp. I want to know your thoughts on like, obviously we see so many movies today that don't quite, that either spend 3 hours and even might still only tell us like one or two things. But I'm curious to hear your thoughts on how this is so well crafted.
Yeah, it's well put together. I think there's, at the end of the day, I'm always going to be trying to push for more people to watch more shit, more new stuff, expand your horizons, expand the palette, like try new things and whatnot. And I think so many people get caught up in the idea of like, oh, if I want to watch like a quote unquote, like a really good movie or like a really artsy movie, it's going to be 3 hours long. It's going to be Oppenheimer length. It's going to be Killers of the Flower Moon, 3.5 hours. Like, oh, the new like Western movie Horizon, 3.5 hours. Oh, I'm not watching. Oh, I can't. It's just too long. It's too much. That's fine. But at the same vein, you don't have to give up your journey just because these moves along. There are so many good movies that are tight and crisp and contain all that punch that you're looking for. And Seventh Seal is one of them. First of all, it's an hour 30. Okay, hour like 20, hour 30, whichever way you look at it. Second of all, you can find it on YouTube. It's super easy. It's there. It's like public. You can watch
in
it.
4K too. Like it's
it's crispy. It looks great. And just for me, the fact that, I think it's more of a testament of skill. You can delay something. Okay, let's get an analogy. Analogies are fun. You can cook a chicken in a slow cooker, and it'll probably turn out really good over a long period, like 16 hours in a slow cooker. You could also cook a really good chicken in like 10, 15 minutes on the pan if you know how to do it properly. It's more a testament of skill and craft, in my opinion, for someone to make a tight 90 that packs all the punch of a 3-hour epic. And I think that's what this film does for me. It's concise, it's precise, it says exactly what it wants to say. It doesn't drag anything out. Maybe a testament of the era and the kind of filmmaking. And again, it is technically a foreign film. Different cultures make films differently, see the medium differently, but it does all that so picture perfect that you can't help but be sucked in. It feels like you've watched something that's 3 hours, but it's only an hour 30. You can put that on before bed and you'll feel fine. And I think that's maybe what I kind of want to see a return to form for filmmaking is like, make the tight 90s. Everyone loves a tight 90. I mean, you look at the culture nowadays with like TikTok and Twitter and then all the film people there, and they always say like, oh, checking the time. Oh, tight 90. Awesome, I'm there. That's what gets people there. That's what gets people more willing to be like, okay, maybe I'll go check something out,
Yeah.
Because when you watch something, you sacrifice your time. And as we know in this film, time is precious and the way you spend is precious. So I can't blame anyone if they don't want to go watch a 4-hour movie or a 3-hour movie. But when you have these beautiful short films, people are more likely to sacrifice their time to go check something out. And I think that's good. I think that's what we need more of. And this film is textbook. It is textbook for what you can achieve when the master has the right tools and they've sharpened their skills.
No, I think that you're right on the money too. And one of the things that like blows my mind about films back then, they're able to like, it's almost like when you don't have the tools that we have like now, where you can go, all right, let me just dump this in the VFX Dropbox and you guys can make me a 45-minute fight sequence that has no stakes and a big sky beam. Like how your ending actually has to come about. And I found that a lot with a lot more of the classics that we've been watching, particularly like this season, but some of the ones that we've watched in the past as well. Like how impactful they can be in such a short amount of time. Like I think between that 90 to 100-ish minutes is like a really great place for a film to sit. Because as you said, like if you're going, like most people don't live right next to a theater. My closest cinema is about a 20-minute drive from here. If I want to go to like IMAX or something big, it's like it's an hour away. And so you think about, if I'm going to go to IMAX to watch, for example, an MCU film that's coming, that's 2.5 hours. We're talking an hour drive, half an hour of trailers, 2.5 hour movie. Like that is, and then an hour home. Like that is my whole night gone, almost like most of a day gone if I go in the middle of a day.
Oh, yeah.
And particularly like right now, what you and I are experiencing with like the film festival circuit at the moment, Tate, like being able to go and see a couple of movies back to back is really handy when they're like, I love that. And that being said, I'm the kind of person who I've sat in a theater for 24 hours and watched all 6, Lord of the Rings films back to back. And I've loved that. And at the same time, I want so much of these easy, quick watches that are to the point. And as you said, I feel like when you have a kind of like smaller amount of time, you have to use a lot more of, as you said, like those skills to bring that story to life and be able to keep things deep enough when you don't have, like we said, an extra half an hour to do exposition dumps and all of that. And this film tells a lot visually and through its, its storytelling and its kind of musical elements. And I think that's part of what makes it work so well, even at that short runtime.
Absolutely.
I mean, listen. Go ahead.
I had just watched, it was a couple of weeks ago, I wanted to watch an older film, Buster Keaton's Sherlock Jr., 45 minutes, black and white film. Beautiful. No dialogue. Well, it does have dialogue, but no sound, no speaking. It's not a talkie, it's just music. But Sherlock Jr., 45 minutes, absolutely incredible. But Kay, sorry to cut you off, bud. What were you going to say?
No worries. Well, I'm just contributing to my thoughts to the whole thing. Yeah, like I think that I've had discussions with people where I talk about film length, and there are people that either see film length as something important or it speaks to the quality of the film.
Like if it's longer, it's better. Is that
yeah.
what?
Yeah, like it's longer, it's better, it's
it
these
all.
things there. Yeah, like and like I mean, listen, I saw the Batman. I sat in that theater and I'm like, I spent half of my day there. And I'm like, and not to mention AMC, you play so many goddamn trailers and so many different intros that it's like half an hour before you even get started. But nonetheless, so I'm like, I had a thing where I was like, when I would go see the Batman, I would like literally spend like 4 hours of my time here. And I'm like, and it's like, but at the same time, there are films like the Batman, like Schindler's List, like some of the ones we mentioned, that you do sit there and you're like, that was worth every minute.
Mm-hmm.
And I think, but as Tate, as you're saying, I think that people often will assume, and I think that even on the pretentious side of the film, like talk thing, I do think that there are people who will argue that, oh, longer is better and that this is good because it's this long. It's like, to me, what does the story require? This film proves that you only need an hour and 20 minutes to talk about the whole concept of how death is talked about within religion. And it's this, and people will say, well, you sacrifice depth of story. This didn't.
Yeah.
Exactly.
This talks so, and it's like, it's to me, it's like, we don't need to. It honestly shows restraint and effort and creativity that you were able to do a lot in a little.
Mm-hmm.
And I look at that and I'm like, I am just blown away by it, and just kind of having that, because I'll be honest, like looking at going from watching Jim's film last week, which was 3 hours long, and being like, this was great, this was awesome, but being reassured that I'm like, oh, an hour and 30, okay, I can do that. That's pretty solid. Like, that's a solid story that I won't forget what the beginning was like as I'm watching, like, but it is very helpful that you feel like, as you were saying, and I think the one thing is, like, when you're in the hands of a master, they can give you that. It is that thing of the craftsmanship, the creativity, all of that. It's just, again, as you guys have been saying, I think that a story has a length it wants to be. And sometimes that is 3 hours. But I think it's really impressive. It's why, as we were talking about, short films are so goddamn impressive if you're able to convey a whole, like, it's why the first 10 minutes of Up, best short film that's ever been made, of you're able to convey a life in 10 minutes.
Yeah.
And it's beautiful. And it's like, I think that it's really incredible when filmmakers are able to do that and take you on a journey that makes you feel this deeply for not an entirely long amount of time.
And we had actually had on the podcast, like I think last season, we did a double feature with Infernal Affairs and The Departed. So Infernal Affairs is the original film, and Martin Scorsese adapted it to The Departed. And The Departed is 3 hours long, and Infernal Affairs is an hour 20. And we actually get to compare the two. Like, I personally preferred Infernal Affairs more. It is very interesting that, like, you're still able to convey the level of emotion that you need to have to feel the weight of characters dying or what's happening to them in half the time. Like The Departed has its benefits as well, having a bit of extra time, but I was really blown away by how I was still invested in what was happening to the characters in half the time in Infernal Affairs. And it's a self-plug. You can go back and listen to that episode if you want.
Absolutely.
Like, one of the other things that stands out to me when we keep looking back at some of these old classic films is what aspects of the craft have kind of like lived on. You know, like particularly in the Hitchcock films, like the cinematography, the camera work always stands out. And in this film, there were moments where I was like, okay, like this feels like a film from the 50s, you know? But then like visually, I mean, obviously because it's black and white and very simple kind of camera work. But then there are these little moments in which the lighting and the camera is placed so perfectly that I'm like, I could see this in like an A24 film that dropped like this year, like a Greg Fraser kind of Dune close up. And there are those moments where it's like when the witch is about to be burnt, the witch I say is about to be burnt, and Antonius is leaning on the outside of the cage with his head, and he's just looking up and talking to her. And I remember looking at that and I was just like, this is so impeccably framed. And you could go into layers of like, you know, he's being shot through the cage and she's kind of not. But he's looking for, are you actually connected with the devil? Like, can you speak to him? Like, and he looks at her and he goes, I don't see the evil here. And there's so much emotion in the performance by Max von Sydow as well, but particularly like those parts. And there are a couple of other close-ups that come up towards the end that between that and the lighting stand out to me as I'm going, this doesn't feel old. All of a sudden, it feels so. Yeah. It's like if you got to watch Oppenheimer in 1570, those black and white scenes of like the close-ups of Oppenheimer and the other people who are kind of happening. Like that experience is what this kind of felt like in those moments, and I'm going like, how does it feel like a film that's 70 years newer when it's from all
we had a similar discussion about this with Hitchcock, where it's like you just have these people and then it makes you wonder. I think a lot of these people are just inspired by what these people did.
Yeah,
and
totally.
it's like I think that there is just a way that it evolved in just these techniques set the stage for what we use. I mean, it's a thing that if you were to use this technique today, it would feel fresh because it's not what we're used to.
Yeah.
It would feel, it's like it's a thing of Bergman. This is my first Bergman film I've actually got a chance to sit down and watch. But I mean, he's like one of the greats, like always classically considered film school royalty, like absolute, just, you know, like classic Criterion Collection, like beautiful filmmaker. And you can see why. You can see that there's a point, like beyond all the pretentiousness of film school, there is truth. This guy knew how to tell a story.
Yeah.
But as I said, I think it goes back to what you said at the beginning, Naf. It's because of it's because of him caring about the story and the fact that him making this story helped him. And I know it helped me in a couple of ways, but one thing that I know, Tate, you mentioned again off mic, that it was that the concept of how religion is handled in this film. And I think it's really interesting, Naf, that this is on that Vatican 45 list, because I'm like, guys, I don't know,
it in a positive light.
Which I'm like, either good for you that you acknowledge this, and it's like, I hope it's for the right reasons, but it's like, did you guys understand the play? It's like this play is about us.
I think that it's very indicative of, as we said, you've got the element of the craft and knowing what you're doing behind the camera, but also being very understanding and clear on what your themes are in the film. And it's exactly that, like I said, and that was one of the things that you had wanted to talk about too, Tate. Like, still a seminal, man. Like, what's your takeaway on I guess how religion's portrayed in this film?
I'm excited to get banned in multiple countries, but I'm going to be
it.
I'm going to be
here for it.
No. I'm not built with like being able to pull 100 quotes out of my hat for a movie, but the most prevalent quote in my mind when I think about this film is when he's during his confessional and he says, "We make an idol out of our fear and call it God." Like that to me is a very interesting thing, because we live in a world in a context of like, you know, if a child's born today, they will hear like, Christianity, Islam, Buddhism. They're going to hear about all that around them. But if you go to the genesis of Earth and life on Earth, religion wasn't just sitting there in a book ready for us to read. Yeah, it wasn't there. It had to spring from somewhere. The genesis of it. Some texts will speak to prophets who were spoken to by the creators. Others, you know, more different ways. But from a logistical perspective, people saw something, felt something. And through their fears and through their insecurities and whatever was before them, they created, or shall I say, created understood. I'm religiously impartial. This isn't a statement, but it's created, understood, felt, related to the concept of a deity through what they were going through. I think it's very interesting that, again, as much as this film is an argument and a discussion and a conversation, it's never a damning. It's never a damnation. It is very much damning the ideas of what modern religion can turn into, where it's just warring and factions and weaponizing text and weaponizing sanctity and holiness for like improper means. But it is never like religion is the worst thing. It's very much a critical understanding and a reconciliation of our relationship to creators and to religion. And there's a lot that goes into it, and it's an in-depth thing, and everyone's going to have a different experience to go with it. But I did very much appreciate the realistic approach to it. It was like, fundamentally, on a realistic level, this is the genesis of religion. It is us and our fears, and we have a way to reconcile that. If I am a sinner, I can reconcile by appealing to a God. If I have done something wrong, I can pray for forgiveness. Just the honesty in that sentence that's my favorite thing ever. The honesty is like fundamentally, when you take away this and that, and this book and that book, and this border and that wall, fundamentally that is what you're left with when it comes to religion. Our fears and the way we reconcile with them. Very fascinating. Love that. Great party trick. Tell all your friends. Tell them that.
There's a word called pareidolia, which is around how as humans we tend to see patterns in things where there aren't necessarily patterns, and how particularly things like human faces can show in like the stars or those kind of things. It's a very human experience to look at something that potentially doesn't have meaning and want to ascribe meaning to it. And exactly what you had said, like if you think about a lot of the visual phenomena that we experience now, things like the Northern Lights, like we look at that now, we've got an explanation for it. Could you imagine being in that place thousands of years ago and looking at that? Bro, like I would be
Johnny, what the hell? What the hell is that, brother? God's mad at us, man.
It makes so much sense, It's like you understand why certain meaning is ascribed to like real life instances, and it's a lot of it is exactly that line. It's one of the ones that says the first one on the list of the quotes on IMDb. It's the best one. Yeah, death is an idol, and we name it God. It's exactly that. Like we are one of the few creatures on Earth that understand the nature of like. One, that we're conscious, and two, that we're going to die. Like no other animals know that. They don't know what's happening when it's happening. Yeah. We're the only ones. And it is, as you had said earlier, a very terrifying thing to contend with. And I think that, to your point earlier, one of the things the film does really well is right at the end, at that moment, you've got this main character, Antonius, who's been disillusioned and trying to figure out the whole time. And he's kind of upset when he says to Death, like, you don't have any answers for me? Like, this whole thing, like I was here for the answers, you don't have it. But at the end, if you think about the last thing he does before he dies, he's praying. He's praying to God. He said, I hope that there's something, like give me something. And it makes so much sense that at that moment, in those last moments, that it's something that we still will cling to. And a lot of people will cling to because it's a comfort, right? And comfort is incredibly important to so many people.
Well, absolutely. And like, I don't know, my own take on it, because I was religious for a very long time. And, now, but what I always think about with religion, because I came at it I found the concept of, unconditional love very interesting. And that kind of started me on that thing, which I think ultimately still is what I loved about it and what I still kind of apply to my life, even though I'm no longer consider myself Catholic in the way that others do. I think I go more towards just an overall spirituality. However, the thing is that what I do think is very interesting, and I think this film portrays, as you said, Tate, it doesn't necessarily condemn anything. It gives explanation for why people are doing this. It's like, this plague, like it's one of the most fascinating parts of the film where they're like, oh yeah, well, like, people don't know what's going on, with this plague, and they want something. They want to feel in control of something.
Yeah.
And you know, and so they're like, okay, maybe if I flog myself enough, I will remove, you know, this plague from me. Maybe if I do this, it's just, it's this desperate sense of control. I mean, hell, even, you know, even Max von Sydow's character has that moment where him playing chess is his way of trying to gain control with it. You know, like it's that idea of, oh, I think I can outsmart death. And it's like, you know, and so I think there will be people being like, oh, look, the religious people are so stupid in this movie. It's like, no, he's doing the exact same thing just through a different means. Yeah. It's like what this film is more saying is we all have these various ways of coping. Exactly. And it gives explanation for that
to a lot of people. I think is also.
I mean, I remember like, you know, fasting and, you know, the idea of, oh, maybe if I pray on my knees, it's like a suffering that will be offered to God. And it's that idea of I'm putting myself willingly through pain in order to like, not to please a deity, but being like, I'm willingly taking this on in order to do this. And in my head, it was like, oh, well, that makes a lot of sense. Like, but I'm like, now I look at it and I'm like, damn, so you're telling me you just abused yourself for an hour.
Yeah.
But
I mean,
like,
I mean, if you want me to like get nerdy with it as well, it's the and this can be for Naf as well. He'll appreciate it. It's the Last Jedi Luke Skywalker thing. It's like, what is the truest form of practicing what you're preaching? The truest form of Luke being a Jedi in that movie, fighting without fighting, versus Antonius in this film at the end. That he is the truest form of what religion can be a wonderful textbook for, which can be good values, good virtues, doing right by others, showing kindness, versus other people in the film who take it in a different way, twist words, approach it differently, use it to inflict harm on others. It's the truest forms of the values of the text. And I think fundamentally, when you go through so many of these texts, they are rooted in all these fantastic concepts that are bastardized and cherry-picked and used for agendas and used as weapons. Exactly. So it's maybe, you know what, maybe that's why the Vatican picked it. Maybe there's one soul left over there that doesn't care for any other stuff and actually sees it. Because it's true, it's fundamental basics. Antonius is like a perfect exemplar. He's not blind. He questions things. He does well by others, but he stands up and is willing to put his sword to justice if needed. He is regretful and seeks to better himself, but he does not let that become a bastion of like his own grief and his own suffering and let it consume him. I think it's a very interesting way to approach it. It's not a condemnation, but a discussion. It's like, well, let's have these hard conversations because we're not going to get anywhere without them, especially on the topic of religion, where people like to stonewall.
Yeah, no, you're exactly right. And I think the film also, as you said, because it covers this feeling from so many different aspects. You've got the scenes in the bar as well, where you've got the guys going, this is Armageddon. Like, this is the end of days. Like, this is how we're all wiped out because we live in sin or whatever. And so you have so many different perspectives from which this is coming that it prompts that conversation. It's a beautiful conversation as well. Like, it's, yeah. And I think it can feel, I guess, confronting sometimes as well, because, you know, for a lot of us that have experienced, like, you know, I grew up like very religious as well. Like this stuff feels like quite real. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So
yeah, well, and going with that, like I guess we probably got other topics to jump to, but I think this is a perfect jumping off point. Well, I guess Naf, I interrupted you. Is there anything else you wanted to? Good. So going with that, it is this concept of, I think, ultimately what all of this religion and all of this kind of goes to, it is dread and acceptance. Yeah. Like, it is kind of this thing of like, ultimately we all have the same question, no matter how many religions would like to say they know what comes afterwards and how many people talked about it, how many people have had a near-death experience and done these things and wants to say this is how it is. Ultimately, it's the question none of us will ever know, and we will never have an answer to it. And I think that's what terrifies everybody.
Yeah.
And it is that thing of like, I don't know how both of you felt, but I think that this film presents that question through so many means, while also not presuming it knows the answer.
Yeah. I think that it takes the stand of someone who's in the same position that we are, who wants to understand. And you can look at, again, those first few lines of the film where you've got Death saying to Antonius, like, I'm Death, I have long walked by your side. You know, like, if we look at this in the bigger picture, from the second you're born, you start dying, right? Like, this death doesn't necessarily mean that he's been with him since he's been on the Crusades. This is like a bigger picture. Like, from when you were born, you grew, and then you started dying. And so, like, I've been with you this whole time. And in all of that time, you still have a character who's not ready. And as we said, as you look through like the different instances in where the game is played and how Antonius's mentality changes throughout there, you do see that at the start he goes to the church. He's you know, bearing his soul to the priest. And there is an instant like, oh shit, I fucked up moment when he realizes it was Death. He's like, I was meant to be playing this, and I didn't realize, I was not familiar with Death's game, you know, like that he would try and swindle me. And that moment is such a like, I'll remember that. I was like, oh God, he will remember it.
Yeah.
But I find that, as we said, it's sort of around the halfway mark of the film where he meets up with the main kind of like couple and the kid with Mikhail and Mia, and I can't remember the main guy's name. But as he starts to experience, there's that line where he says, I'm going to remember these fresh strawberries and this milk. I'm going to take this with me. And it is a bit of, it's not about me living and dying anymore. It's about the moment. It's about being here right now and recognizing that this is something special and this is something beautiful. And I think that comes full circle at the end, where he sees his wife. And as you said, the way that the acting in Max's eyes is so profoundly heartbreaking, because you see this, like, it has been 10 years that I've been longing to come back here and I made it, but that also means it's over. He says so much with his face. And I remember by the time that the film ended, and I was sitting there afterwards, and I had this kind of, it's that feeling of dread afterwards. It's like he just knew the whole time, you know. It's like, yeah, I suppose how I imagine people who are faced with like a terminal illness start to feel when that kind of comes full circle. Yeah,
absolutely.
And I think that that's a big part of his arc. It's the acceptance. It's like at the start, as you had said, Tate, he's fighting because he just wants to live. By the end, it's a different purpose. It's like, I can't beat him. I will never beat Death. It will never happen. But what I can do is, for the time that I have here, and as long as I can outlast Death, I can make my life have meaning. I can do beautiful things. I can experience beautiful things. I think that's the crux of his arc overall, and that's what I find most beautiful.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah, like it is such an interesting thing. But Tate, what do you think about that?
Damn, I mean, it's heavy. It's heavy. It's a tough one. I think the way Death is presented in this film, and kind of to your points, I don't know if it was the topic we're going to get to later or whatnot, but it's just the way the Death was portrayed. We'll marry the two together, but Death is neutral. Death is very neutral in the film. He's not aggressive. He's not a dickhead. But he's also not like, oh, I'm so sorry. He's very neutral. He's very plain. Helps perhaps with the Swedish, where it's very like, you know, it's a very staccato language. It's a very firm and, you know, very like set. But, you know, the way that he's portrayed is very neutral. He's very fair. It is the way it is. And he's, as much as he commends, you know, Antonius, and he's like, oh, he speaks to him fairly. He speaks to him as an equal. Death has no favorites. Death has no bias. You know, I love the way that's done, because I think overall it's not trying to say, oh, death is this horrible thing we need to be afraid of, and it's like, oh, don't worry about death. Death is fine. It's coming. Death is what it is, and like we were saying earlier, like you guys have so beautifully illustrated, it's what we do with death and the time that we have before we get to it that really matters. So as much as it's this beautiful story of him reconciling that death is coming, it's also kind of like a comfort where it's like, you know, let's take this larger than life scary feeling, let's make it physical. So it's a person, it's a being. We can see it, we can touch it, we can look at it. Some people can't see it just yet, but you know, we can see it. The audience can see it. Let's take this big scary thing. Let's make it small. Let's spell it out to you Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. Let's spell it out to you in terms you can understand and see it with. And through that, we're going to get through this together.
Well, I know
I told... Oh,
I want to ask you something, okay?
Okay.
Sorry, because I had known that as we were talking about those kind of like big ideas, that is in its essence K-core. And I loved your reaction there as he had like mentioned, it's taking this big idea and making it palatable. So like, I love that very much aligns with the things that make films like special for you too. And I wondered if you had more thoughts on that.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. Well, that's exactly why I had that reaction, which was I would always tell, like, we always talk about NAF core on this show, and for a while I was trying to figure out what is K core, what is actually like something that like what defines my what defines what I like when I think of like very special films to me, like what really resonates with me. And it occurred to me the other day when I was watching Barbie and La La Land.
Yes.
Where I was like, it really like illustrated what I think is really beautiful, which is I love when films are able to take a larger concept or take something very small and make it a big deal. Like what I love about La La Land is ultimately it's about two struggling artists in LA. That's what the film's about, trying to make a relationship work. But it's so much bigger than that. And it's like, it makes you feel that way. Conversely, Barbie takes this IP and this classic thing to ask us a question of what does it mean to be human, and would you choose to be human? And knowing everything about it. This film, likewise, it's why, as Tate, it's why you said, like, why are we all just instantly on board with the film the minute we hear the elevator pitch? Because it's simple. It's simple. It evokes an image in your head. It's like again, it is like a painting. It is like a painting has one frame. A painting has one frame to tell a story. And to me, this film does that with its frame of death. As you said, Tate, death is not portrayed as this hideous, horrible, monstrous thing that like with guts coming out of its mouth, and like it easily could have been terrifying.
He's just a guy.
But I think it's so much better with it being like, no, I'm here. And it's a person that's not malicious. He's not torturing people.
It's just his job.
He's not doing this. It's almost like it's a living. Like, it's just his job.
Well, I wanted to ask specifically about that too. There is a part around in the middle of the film where we actually see Death working, or going to work. You've got somebody who's chilling up in the tree and he's hiding, and Death pulls up. And it's one of the only times we actually see him, work his day job, working in his 9 to 5 instead of just, moving the mouse on Skype so that he knows that he's pretending to work. But I really love that conversation between him and the dude in the tree where you almost have the 5 stages of grief in 30 seconds. It's that quick. I love that the initial part is like he's just cutting the tree and he's like, what's that? And he looks like, what's happening here? And I love that conversation between Death and I can't remember his name, Jeff or something. But I wondered maybe your thoughts first, Tate, on that scene and how it's portrayed of him working.
Him going to work, it's tricky, man. It's tricky. It's heavy. I think it's this, you're eventually going to get what's coming to you. You're eventually going to get what's coming to you. And it plays into, it plays a lot into the idea that you can't evade death. You can't escape it. So him showing up, it's the nature of being. It's the nature of being. He's going to be there. Again, it is very strange. It's the first time we see him, quote unquote, going to work. He's chopping them up. He's chopping the trees, getting ready to fell and get him going. But you can't avoid that. And it's, in a way, we almost as the audience need the reminder that even though this figure we've seen so far, he's just been present, he's just been around, he's just been there. That doesn't mean that he's inactive. That doesn't mean that he's not doing anything. He's always going to be there. He's always going to be lurking and looming. Doesn't mean he's idle. Idle hands do the devil's work. It's just like those that inaction that really makes you think like, oh, nothing bad's gonna happen. Something bad will happen eventually, and avoiding it and the folly of trying to do that's when the problems come in. But that scene for me represents that, it's almost simple, but just the idea of him being there so casually having a conversation, that's eventually you're going to face the music eventually. And it's the way that you are going to greet death. Are you going to greet death as an equal? Or are you going to think that you're above death? I think it's those who think that they're above death and dying that it's an injustice to them. It's a horrible thing that's happening. It's cruel. It's evil. Oh, why do I deserve this? I don't deserve this. I can't reconcile. Those kind of individuals are going to struggle with that the most and find that the rug gets pulled under them quicker than those who are willing to face it on equal footing. Yeah, that's what I took away from that scene in effect. And then to compare that with Antonius at the end, who's like, "Yep, I'm cooked, but you know what? I played the game, and I like you said, Naf, really, I played it well. Yeah, that's the way it is. And then it leans into the ending as well, where it leans into the ending with them on the hill. It's emulating a painting, the dance, the dance macabre. It is a dance. It is it is not a joyous experience to be dead. It is an acceptance. It's an acceptance. It's going into it with optimism instead of cowardice.
A really fun fact about that scene as well is I saw that Ingmar Bergman came up with the scene on the spot, and he looked up at the hills and he was like, I want to do this shot, and everyone else had gone home. So he grabbed a bunch of like extras and, people that weren't the main characters, put them in costume and then shot them. But the main thing is he had 30 minutes to shoot, because what inspired him is he looked up at the clouds in the distance and he saw a cloud formation that he thought was beautiful. He wanted it in his film. So he put the scene together, shot it, 30 minutes, done, and then moved on.
Yeah. It's insane. That's kind of awesome.
And Kay, on the previous thing we were talking about as well, question for you, because you've got Death having a conversation with this guy. The guy's trying to fight and be like, no, but can I do this? Can I do this, please? Blah, blah. And as Tate was saying, he's not like I think that the film portrays Death as a thing, as a being. It's there, and as we said, it's obviously unavoidable, but as we said, there's neutrality there. Like, he's not trying to do evil things. Your time is just up.
Yeah.
But one of the really interesting shots was after the tree falls, there's a little squirrel that comes up and sits on the stump. And I wondered what your takeaway was from that scene, Kay.
Wow.
Well, like the squirrel is interesting, but I think it's this might get really deep, but like
in the rabbit hole.
All right. So,
is there any mushrooms anywhere? I'm ready.
When my mom passed, and I was like, listen, you guys wanted the answer, and this is the best that I got with it.
Yeah, we're going
like you said, we're going deep, and I was like, you ain't kidding. But when I like for people who may not know, I was in the room when my mother passed, and so I saw that happen, and when one of the most interesting things that I've ever experienced was, I remember the following days when we were arranging like the funeral stuff and we were getting all that taken care of. I remember we went to like a Gordon Biersch like restaurant in Arizona, and we were like sitting there, and it was surreal to me because I'm like, here we are going through immense amount of grief and rawness, that our whole world feels like it's moving in slow motion and stillness. And yet people are having lunch. The world moves on. And it's like, these people don't know. These people won't know. They don't know that this is happening. And I think about that, and that was one of the biggest like things with grief, like the concept of acceptance itself is that feeling of almost being like, it's a weird, calm, got it. Yeah, there is nothing to do. It is just this happened. Yeah. And that's, I think, why it's acceptance. It's not a welcoming feeling. It's not a thing there. Acceptance is, it's like, it's an acknowledgement.
Yeah.
Of what is there.
Yeah.
And that I think is the key to the whole thing, at least to me, is I I don't know. I found
Yeah.
I guess I just that's when I think about that shot and the idea that a squirrel just pops up. It's like the squirrel didn't know that guy died.
Mm.
The squirrel didn't know
Just
that.
one of the
It just
guys in the
knows,
restaurant
hey,
eating lunch.
hey, new stump. Hey, new stump.
Yeah.
And it's like, you know, it's not a malicious thing. And I think that you couldn't have done it necessarily with a person, because I think that we would impart too much meaning on a person doing it.
Yeah.
Like you couldn't just have somebody walk by, because you would be like, oh, that guy, it's the incaring, it's the indifference of the world. It's like, but a squirrel, it's just
Innocent.
almost a blissful ignorance.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Which I think,
It's
to your
a
point,
just-
is almost about how the other people in the world that aren't experiencing what you've experienced in that moment, it is a bit of like blissful ignorance. They don't know. They don't know the weight of what's just happened to you or to whatever other person. And I think that, like, firstly, very beautiful analogy, and thank you for sharing that story too, Kay. But
Yeah.
it's you're exactly right. It is a feeling that squirrel comes back, and it is that feeling of things just go on. Things still exist. It doesn't end when it ends for this person. I saw somebody explain, I think it was Duncan Trussell explaining the concept of death as like, we are dolphins swimming in the ocean, and every now and then you come up to breathe, and you jump out of the ocean and you do your flips and you do all your cool shit, and eventually you just end up back under the ocean. And each kind of time that you're coming out of the ocean as a dolphin is one of those kind of lives, or that energy that renews and exists and continues around. And so many people have these wonderful concepts of death. The Good Place does a brilliant job where she's talking about the I think it's the Buddhist proverb for death around the wave, and how it's not a gone, it's a changing of energy. A wave is still part of the ocean, and when the wave goes, it's not like it's not watering, but when it becomes the wave, it becomes water, and when it goes back to standard, it all still is the same thing, just consistently renewing. And naturally, like we said, there are so many different interpretations for like death and what happens after, and so many different people have what they believe to be right. And if you're listening, and obviously you guys as well, will have your own interpretation too. But it is like, it's to Kay's point, the acceptance and the acknowledgement doesn't mean that it's going to be a like a good thing. You know, sit there and be like, hell yeah, come at me, death. But it's like throughout your life, crappy things are going to happen to you that you can't change. So that acceptance allows you to live with that. And I like this, like we could ramble about it for ages. And I know I could as well, because it's similar to what you were saying earlier, Tate, like something that I've grappled with my entire life. And I'm sure for you too, Kay, because particularly the experience of being religious and having an idea of what the afterlife is going to be like, and then moving away from that, there is a bit of like, well, okay, what happens now then? You know? Like a lot of my life, I grew up thinking I was going to live forever. Like I was never going to die. That was my concept. So that was an interesting and rude awakening.
And it is an interesting thing when you go through like a very near experience of death, that I feel like you kind of gain a sense of, you have to reckon with it.
Yeah. Do you mean
you just?
Sorry, Kay.
Go ahead.
Just ask. Do you mean like in the sense of similar to like yourself, like actually like seeing it in the form of like another person, like a loved one, or do you mean in terms of like having a near-death experience, like I nearly died?
I mean, I think probably ultimately both, I would imagine. But like, I think that obviously if it happens to you, I think that it's a very different thing. Like I constantly think about what my mom was thinking in that moment. Cause I'm like, because again, I think about it very similar to as you guys are talking about. It's one thing to think about it. It's one thing to also see it happen to someone else, but it's another thing to be like, even with you were talking about before, I think Tate, like the concept of like, oh, if we knew the day we were going to die, and like, you know, if everybody had 24 hours, but I the way I've talked about it is I'm like, my family, we sort of knew that there was a timer on, you know, stuff like that. We kind of knew that, but nothing prepared for when it actually was there. Because it is that all of a sudden, it is a lightning flash of a moment of, oh, it's happening. Oh, it's actually happening. Like it's DEFCON 12. Like we need to all really like focus in. And it's, I really I think about like Naf when you're saying when you like because I think what's happening to you, it is that feeling of, but it won't actually happen, right? Like you think about it in the, oh, if I die by family, if I die next to family, it's like I think, but at least for me, I'm like I have to think about, oh, it's literally you looking up at the stars and almost going, shit, this is the last moment.
Yeah. I think
That was the last sunset. Like as Tate, you so beautifully said, that was the last time. Like I will never open these eyes again.
Yeah, that's exactly what I was thinking. That comment from Tate earlier around like one day you're going to close your eyes and not open it. And just a quick shout out to Jedi Connor over in the TikTok chat as well. Who said it's a very
yeah.
Yeah, like we. I mean, I can speak for me and Kay, and I'm sure that this probably aligns with you as well, Tate. But I love the kind of films that get you thinking this kind of stuff. You know, like they can make you feel a little bit more existential. But I think that there are certain cultures that. Like Western culture isn't familiar with death and we're scared of it. And there are other cultures that just aren't, like a lot of like your Eastern cultures, like we said, in terms of like the Buddhist type, like in those spaces that like, they're so accustomed to the idea, like they say meditation is preparation for death, right? They're so ready for it when the time comes. And it's constantly talking about and discussing it. And Western culture is very much like, I don't want to talk about that. That's scary. Let's not. And so to have us three boys in our kind of mid-20s, sitting around the campfire talking about, hey, we are really scared to die. And this film had me thinking about that, but then also opened up my mind to these other kind of ideas and what it could mean, I think is exactly what, A, this podcast is about, bringing those ideas to life. And B, it's like, that's what art is, you know, to prompt those beautiful, beautiful conversations. And I think that we've covered so much beautiful stuff here about this film.
Oh, totally. And as you're saying, Naf, like, well, and Tate, I want to know kind of your feelings, because obviously we talk a lot about like whether it's just on mic, off mic, everything, talking about art and what art is meant to do. And sure, there's art that's meant to simply entertain, and that's beautiful. And that's incredible and valid in its own right and underrated in a lot of circles that talk about cinema. But I think there is, it kind of goes, I always think about that Ethan Hawke interview that he does about not many people think about poetry. Like they don't think about Ellen Ginsberg's poems. They don't think about it until their dad dies. And it's like, it's that thing of like, art is sort of where we go when we don't have an answer for what we're experiencing. And when we don't have a way to articulate it. And that's like film to me. I put in an application of something I was doing where I was like, I think as an autistic ADHD kid who had a lot of thoughts, but very hard to express it. I had a very hard time being able to actually get what was in here out. And it wasn't until I think I started to understand that through film, I can actually express. And I think that's the key with this. And I'm like, I don't know how you guys feel about that. And Tate, especially, I want to know your thoughts on how you feel like art as a medium, and especially as it relates to this film, conveying thought, conveying meaning, and like, does it matter? How does it matter? And like, I'm curious to know your thought.
Right. Like, I mean, we spoke earlier about how like lived experience is such a pivotal part of like the context behind the way we interpret things. And I think, you know, we can't go to the Middle Ages. We live through kind of I was about to say we can't like go live through a plague, but we kind of did in a sense. So that's informed of the context of the way we behave now. But we can't go to the Middle Ages. We can't go to space. We can't fight wars. I can't be in other people's shoes. I mean, I look at the films I've watched this year. I can't go to desert planets and ride worms. I don't struggle with gender identity, but I can watch a film about it, and that can expand my horizons on people who do struggle with it. And plug I Still the TV Globe, please go watch that. I can watch films about so many different things and kind of put mental eggs in each of those baskets and expand my horizons. So in the sense that I can't live those things and I can't do those things, and if every film is a conversation, I can listen to these conversations and expand my horizons. So for me, art is very much as a conversation. It's an open hand into perspective. It's like a come and join. Let me tell you something. Let me tell you a story. Let me tell you my point of view. So when we get films like this, they definitely, you know, they provoke introspection. They provoke looking at the world through a different lens. I think that's the beautiful thing, is that you won't have that without doing it. Like, you know, you won't have the fun of rock climbing unless you go climb some fucking rocks. You know, you're never going to go surfing unless you go get in the freaking water.
Yeah.
So in the same way that you're never going to have these conversations about death unless you're sitting around the campfire chatting, but from what substance will you be able to have any of these things about death unless you've experienced them? And I'll tell you something, and it's a big shocker, and I've had a lot of people tell me, you know, in a kind, like a kind way, that like you're still so naive. I've never had anyone in my life die yet, but all my grandparents are alive. All my family are alive. I've never experienced death. Never have. I remember my ex told me, she's like, "You're so naive still. Like, it's gonna happen one day. You're not gonna be ready for it." And I'm like, yeah, probably not. I haven't, and so many people I know have, and I'm ignorant entirely to that. But it's still something that worries me, and it's still something that sits. So being able to engage with poetry and with film and with different things and conversations, your stories, engaging with stories, and again, stories, engaging with stories and all the forms of media that it comes in. That's the strength of art. And then with film being arguably the most popular form of story in the modern day, that's where this strength really needs to come in. And that's where I think films like this, tight 90s, quick films, big questions, lots to say, lots to do, but easy to digest. That's where this shit rocks for me. I love that. That's why this is why it's up on the list. This is why it's on the coveted Tate approval list, of which not many films get. Very, very wonderfully put. And I think that you're right, that I think through a lot of experience, like grief is something that will come to everyone, but it will come to everyone at a different time. For some people, it hit them younger. For some others, as you mentioned, it was something that you haven't come across. And I know that it was something that, like, for me, I experienced really for the first time like 3 months ago. Like that's I actually had a loved one like pass that affected me directly, not like a friend of a friend or Jason. Like I had one of my like best friends last year. His father had passed away, and that was like, you know, a harrowing experience as well. Like that was really painful. But it's a different kind when it is directly there and yours, you know. And I think that it does give a lot more. Like it also can enhance the feelings that these films have as well. And that's obviously not to say that if you haven't experienced it, that you can't connect with this, because as you said, there are so many experiences in life. Like, for example, like in I Saw the TV Glow, there's a very particular experience in there that, you know, that's not something that you like struggle with, or myself, like that gender identity. Like it's not necessarily a thing that I struggle with, but I can still empathize with what these characters are experiencing. And I think that also goes on to all kinds of, you know, like diversity of stories and of performers in this art space, because I think that often people are so quick to be like, well, I can't connect with this character because they're like female, you know, and I'm a guy and I can't,
which is ridiculous.
Like, I mean, I remember we had the conversation a while ago, Kay, where you had mentioned that, like, for example, like Rey was one of the first characters that you were able to really like empathize with and identify with in Star Wars.
I didn't identify with Luke Skywalker. I didn't like when I watched that, like I didn't identify with any of the original trilogy characters when I was a kid. I didn't even like think about it. Like I was like, I liked the world, but I was much more interested in the robot that was on screen for about 5 seconds in IG-88. Like that was my boy. Like literally, I was more interested in those bounty hunters than the main characters. Like, and I was like, but it wasn't until I was older and I watched Force Awakens where Rey made me cry. I felt like Rey. I felt like I identified with her, and I felt like I had that. And I will always stand on that camp of like, that character means so much to me. She became my favorite Star Wars character almost in an instant. And like, but to your point, Naf, where it's like, I mean, I remember having a moment where I'm like, when I hear people talk about, oh, you know, oh, why are they making all the characters like black or like these things there? And it's like people being that, and I'm like, I genuinely have to look, and I'm like, how the hell can you see with earnesty say this film is? Because I'm like, do you honestly relate to Chris Hemsworth as Thor? Do you think that's your experience, my guy? I'm like, I'm white in this thing there, and I'm like, I don't relate to Thor. I think Thor's an interesting character, but I don't see myself in Thor. You know what I mean? Like in the way that I'm like
burlesque, and someone called you gay Thor, so
that's correct. No, I was Thor from Wish. That was what I was called. That was what I was called at Zombie Burlesque.
It's. I think that, as we said, like, there's a phrase that I've loved using lately, and it's like, if you think it's that deep, it is that deep. And that's in any sense of like art. You know, you can look at so many like layers of things within any film that comes out, and you could look at it as, okay, that's fun and that's popcorn and that's done. But if you find layers here, like they are there, they exist. Like art is for interpretation. If you find that it's like incredibly deep, it's because it is. And like, I think rounding out some of the thoughts, for like the characters here too, I love that those kind of final moments for particularly, like Antonius, like they do, really make me think about, there's an acceptance there, and there's a knowing that, what was it? It's acceptance, and it's like confidence in that we've walked the right path, and that aligns so much with Luke Skywalker's ending in The Last Jedi. And that conversation from Rey to hey, taste it first with the conversation from Rey.
He did set it up. It did set it up, but it's okay when he does it.
Well, when Rey is talking with Leia at the end, and she says he's gone, and then they have that little, you know, like it wasn't sad, it wasn't painful, it was okay, you know, like it's done. And Connor in TikTok chat as well says TLJ tie back, so we're good, baby, we're good.
Yep.
Before we look to move into a la carte and close up, do you guys have any final thoughts on things you want to get out?
Yeah, I mean, a great movie take, great pick. So I'm good to move into cinema a la carte. So
I gave it 5 stars. I think I gave it 4.5 stars on Letterboxd, but after this conversation, I'm actually going to go and change it to 5. Like I find that
I'd probably agree.
Those discussions. I think originally, as it started, there was about like it started so strong, and then for me, as I was watching in the middle piece, I was like, there's a lot of setup and a lot of moving of those pieces, and in some parts, I was like, maybe it's a little bit like slow for my liking right now. Then, but in retrospect, as you said, it's like these are the pieces being put in place, and having had this conversation and really blown out my feelings on the film and then like the depth, I would absolutely give this film 5 stars. I think it's absolutely a must watch.
Let's go.
And Pat in TikTok chat says, "Rejoice for those who become one with the Force."
Correct.
That's true.
Yeah, correct.
I think it's really beautiful, the line. It's also one of my most frustrating lines from Yoda as well, because it's like, while it makes sense and I understand where he's coming from, there's parts of Yoda in that sense that I'm also like, you're also being very dismissive of someone's feelings, that they're going to have pain.
I agree.
And there's the balance. Yeah, therein lies the balance that, hey,
that is the one thing with that is the one thing about religious like connotations of death and how to deal with it. Ultimately, I agree with the place they want you to get to, and I do think that is valid and that is correct. However, a lot of that comes at the expense of the dismissal of the pain, confusion, and the first four stages of grief. Like it's yeah.
You're absolutely right. And funnily enough, it's something that I was thinking about when I put together my selections for Cinema a la carte. So like, I've got some good numbers here that we're going to be able to tie in. But
I think so too.
Any final thoughts on what you want to share with us before we do Cinema a la carte?
Oh God, I don't even have that ready. Okay. It's bang. I'm glad you guys enjoyed it. Again, I'm just happy. It's tight, 90, quick and easy, and the
film is shorter than this podcast.
So much. Exactly.
That is correct.
Exactly. So it's just fun.
If you listen to this film, if you listen to this podcast, you should have watched the film. And you're
So yeah, again, it's something short and simple, and I love it, and I love that it's such a spark for so much conversation that can be both personal and reflective, and can be a many-angled thing when it comes to the way we look at the world. So I'm just glad that you guys saw it and enjoyed it. I mean, you could have hated it, and I still would have just been glad you gave it the chance anyway. I think that's what the ethos of your guys' podcast is about. I think that's what everyone's ethos should be. So just watch new shit and try new shit, and then you might like it. And if you don't, you don't, but at least you tried. So that's the way. That's how you should spend your minutes. That's how you should spend your time. So I'm glad you guys enjoyed it. It's a banger.
You are so on the money, and it's one of the things that we've talked about a lot, where it's like, remember to viewers and listeners that like your job in discussing film and art is actually never to change someone's mind on what is. All it is understanding their perspective of how they view it. If you're going into, and again, like when we talk about Star Wars a lot, if you're going into a conversation, be like, this is shit, and you should agree that it's shit, you're in the wrong place. Like, we can talk about things that don't work and things that do work, but like the meaning of art is to talk about, and it's going to have different meanings to everyone, and some things are going to resonate more with others than not. And as you said, Tate, this is absolutely what the podcast is about, is sharing that art. And luckily for us, we haven't come across a film that we haven't enjoyed yet. That's been like the most wonderful gift. But you know, we're still prepared for it. It may happen at one point. Bro, has to be done. Well, yeah, we've covered a lot of really good stuff on the film. I reckon it's a good time to move over to Cinema a la carte, which is a little game that we always love to wrap up with here. So as a reminder, this is where we get to show you the best way to experience this film, and this is through the metaphor of food. So we've each prepared a menu of our own for this week's film, and in that, this film is the main course. What happens from there is we give you like an entree or an appetizer to start. We pair a wine with the film and a dessert. So it gives you an idea of how you can go and experience this film. And it also gives you a bit of, if you've maybe seen some of these other projects that we talk about, this may be the next step for you. And obviously, if you've seen this or you want to get an idea for what this feels like, the other projects will fill you in a little bit. So you guys actually get to decide which set menu you love the most. So let us know in the comments, either in the chat or on YouTube as well. And let us know which of our set menus you think is the best pairing for this film. And Kay, I would love for you to kick us off and show us a little bit
Absolutely.
about...
You got to start with the best. So, like, you got to set the bar. And so, here's the thing. As the, as one of the co-owners of this restaurant, I had to make sure that this was prepared properly. So I have titled mine, The 5 Tasty Stages of Grief.
Dude.
And as an appetizer, I want to start us off with, while not a film, it was mentioned in this general sentiment of things. We have mentioned the podcast already, but this appetizer is sweet, but it has complex notes of very complex views of philosophy, morality, and this idea, while being able to package it in a very bright, beautiful package. But I am going to start off with an appetizer of The Good Place. Ooh, The Good Place is at the beginning, because it also deals with denial, starting us off strong with denial in this idea that I don't belong here, I am not this, and it's constantly leading to where the show goes. And with the main course of the 7th seal being the main course, I consider this the bargaining stage, because it is all about a bargaining. It is all about this idea of bargaining with death and trying to get yourself more time. It's a very savory dish that really just has a lot of complex flavors, but it kind of stays within its palate. But in order to break this open a bit, what I thought you want to have is something that has a little bit of notes of sweetness, but kind of like a whiskey, goes down smoky, goes down very tough. And this is like for the wait till you hear this.
That's no way to talk about me like that. What the hell, man?
Sorry, bro. Sorry.
Shit, man. Guys,
bro,
I thought you were gonna keep it
down
professional.
as smooth as whiskey. I'm sorry. Like, it just. Okay. Or any listeners,
y'all are gonna get away from the joke before I actually get to the kicker of the punchline. Well, so listen, I felt like you don't necessarily want a wine. You want something smoky that goes down a little bit tough, but ultimately leaves you with a very interesting aftertaste. I wanted to go with my whiskey as Manchester by the Sea. And if you've seen this film, And if you see this film, you know why the term smoky is a little particular.
Oh,
and
goodness,
so,
no spoilers, no spoilers.
Not at all. But dessert. How do we get to this point of acceptance on this journey? How do we get to something there? Well, I have something that has a little bit of like it's a dessert it's quite long. It's not exactly a it is something that is savored, something that takes its time opening up your palate, something that is really it causes you almost to accept the film as you accept grief. And that is the Academy Award winning film Drive My Car. As this dessert, this film took me by surprise when I saw it and really affected me in ways that I just didn't think was. It's a film that may not seem like a lot at the beginning, but if you and it is, as we were talking about, it's not a short film by any means, but it is one of those films. If you really get to the end of that, I think there is a certain level of acceptance that you get to. Beautiful. And I think it's really beautiful. So that's those. So to reiterate, my appetizer is The Good Place. The main course is The Seventh Seal, paired with Manchester by the Sea, and a dessert of Drive My Car.
That's wonderful.
Now, I know it's a hard really act to follow.
Pick for third place is what I'm thinking. Like, it's a really good third place. And Tate, I think you're going to do a fantastic job of landing in second place, actually. So,
sure.
I mean, I would love to hear your cinema a la carte.
Sure. I've totally prepared for this. I'm so prepared. I'm very good at lists. It's a well-known quality of mine. I'm so good at hierarchically organizing things. Sure. Okay. This is going to be your guys' deepest wish of having like a spontaneous, the spontaneousness of it all.
Beautiful.
We're going to call this one, we're going to call this one Life's Buffet. We're going to call it Life's Buffet. Okay.
Hey, nice.
I'm going to say, let's start it off with Me, Earl, and the Dying Girl. Let's start it off with that. Now, that's not just to lock in Keegan's vote and solidify him as number 3 overall, but it's also a case of how much we've spent talking about with Seventh Seal, the hubris of youth and the ignorance of youth. It's a film about kids thrown into a really mature situation at a young age. And I'm like, okay, that to me is interesting. Because if we want to have a meditative meal, we're having a meditative menu, we're having an introspective menu, we need to look at it from a myriad of perspectives. So starting with that, we've got these kids who are approaching this really scary situation, this really new, weird, strange, uncertain situation, and seeing how that informs them and the way they change and the way they grow. I think it's admirable, especially imagine... Not in a cruel, dismissive way, but imagine if we all were able to have that kind of formative experience so that we could prepare ourselves. Not everyone gets that, and nobody should, because God, it's an awful thing. But seeing that film, as much as it is a horrible thing, and it's a sad story. It's a sad story. Yeah, it's also a testament to courage and adversity in the face of the horrible things, and how these kids eventually come out on top, not unscathed, but will come out on top because of their unity and the way that they bonded and connected during that time. I think that's important. I think it's a very uplifting way to kind of start you on that meditative journey. If you jump straight into the rabbit hole, you're going to hit your head. So it's nice to use this as a ladder to get into that. Seventh Seal as the main course is great because that's the meat and bones. It's the meat and gravy and potatoes. It's all the big themes packed nice and quick. You've been eating for a while. So you want to have the best stuff nice and easy. All the juice is there, all the sauce, you're ready to go. What's the third one? I need to think of my analogies. The third one, is it dessert first or is it the little
the wine? It's a wine.
The wine.
Something that's kind of akin to Seventh Seal, but might have different flavors that might not be present in the thing and might just complement it well. Or in whatever way you want to interpret.
Okay. I'm gonna go with Her. I'm gonna throw that in there. Her is not a film about death at all. Her is not a film about death, but in this similar vein to Seventh Seal, it kind of embraces melancholy and understanding oneself in relation to the world around them. If the Seventh Seal is about death, Her is very much about life and living, right? How do we reconcile death is Seventh Seal, and how do we reconcile the meaning of living is Her. Her has always stuck out to me as a really impactful film because it's not a perfect film, but it is very acute in what it wants to say and how it wants to say it. And I think it manages to balance out a lot of the sincerity, a lot of it, like, you know, the Seventh Seal is pretty heavy. Her is a nice palette changer because it has its broad strokes of humor and silliness and whimsy and color, but it's arguably more so thematically like kind of dark and miserable sometimes and very introspective. And I think it also ends on a really nice hopeful note as well. They can kind of round out some of the sour parts of Seventh Seal. They can be a bit depressing and a bit tough on the first watch. It's a nice way to round it out. Again, it's not about death, but it's about life. It's the polar opposite, and yet it works.
A wonderful
if that makes
pairing.
sense.
Yeah. What about for
Now,
dessert?
Dessert. Give me a descriptor for dessert. We're going off the dome.
Well, remember, we've had our entree that's kind of set it up. We've had our main course, so you've got your polar opposites on both ends. Dessert is something that's going to leave you kind of cleansed and full and ready for your next experience, your next visit into the cinema a la carte.
Cleansed and full.
What's going to complete the journey for you?
Christ, that's a tough one. That's a tough one. I'm thinking of so many different things right now. And I'm like, cool, fuck it. Cowboy Bebop. So, Cowboy Bebop is very much, what I like about it is it's kind of the similar journey to Seventh Seal, in the sense that Cowboy Bebop is very much, it's a bunch of characters all kind of avoiding their end, right? They all have an inroads destination, and they all kind of avoid it and go off together. And it's about how they reconcile their own issues and their own traumas and what they're going through, knowing that the end is coming there. And the big facing that is like, yeah, the end is right in front of you. And you can, again, like Antonius did, you can try and veer off course as far as possible. The road is always going to take you back. And to round it out in a nice, sweet way, what I think is so admirable about Bebop is that it's not always, you know, taking the long road and diverting might not always be the best way, but sometimes it's what's good for you to get back onto that road of acceptance. Sometimes you do need to delay. Sometimes you do need to kind of figure out what you need to do. And it's not a selfish thing. Sometimes it can be a good thing. Sometimes it's necessary for you to take those steps to go out of your way and heal yourself and figure yourself out. And there's going to be so many people you meet in life from completely different backgrounds, completely different places that are on that exact same road as you, even though you don't know it, even though you might, they might annoy the hell out of you, they might frustrate you. We're all on that road together. And I like how that story kind of embodies the themes of reconciling your end, while at the same time being fun and flavorful and unique and approaching it from different angles. I would close it off just purely on the basis that again, like Seventh Seal, like all the other films we've mentioned, it's about accepting, but not damning. It's about, it's going to happen, but we're going to do it with a smile on our face in the best way possible. Life's buffet. Life's buffet.
Life's buffet. Yeah. Cool. So just round it out for us one more time. So what was your appetizer?
Me, Earl, and the Dying Girl, the Seventh Seal, Her, and Cowboy Bebop.
Beautiful.
Boom.
That is a really solid second place. That is, honestly, be so proud of that.
Exactly.
And you got it off the dome too.
I don't know. It might be third. You know, just like going in there. It might be
second. I'll give you second.
You know, actually, you know, he is second because you're going to be the worst. So let's go.
Wow. Yeah.
And so, absolutely.
I'm content with two.
That's what she said.
My man's earning that silver.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, so my set menu is called Every Death, Everywhere, All at Once.
Damn it.
Ooh.
Yeah.
Damn.
To start off, we want to set the tone and have the palette teased just enough before we get into this very, very heavy, meaty, medium rare, perfectly cooked steak of a film. What we're going to do is we're going to start off with Guillermo del Toro's Pinocchio. a film that deals with the nature of existence and what it means, what it means to be real, you know, to live, and a character that experiences death through his naivety. There are times in the film the character dies and comes face to face with the embodiment of death, and has to have those conversations and recognize, hey, this is the last time. Like, this is it. You know, like you don't get another chance. Those conversations are so beautiful. And I think that, again, the theme of this set menu is a lot of it, I'm realizing, is they're all conversational. You know, they're all interpersonal character kind of drama. And so we start off with Pinocchio. We then move on to our main course, which is The Seventh Seal by Ingmar Bergman. And we pair that with this beautiful, it's not really a wine, say, it's a cocktail. It's like, you know, when you have a Long Island iced tea and it's got a little bit of everything in there and it tastes just perfect every time? Our Long Island iced tea is a TV show that is available on Netflix. It's created by and starring Duncan Trussell. It's called The Midnight Gospel. It's 8 episodes. They're about half an hour apiece. The premise of this show is he had people on his podcast, and then they've essentially converted the podcast episodes, which each one is dealing with like a different aspect of like existence and death and mortality. And they convert it into a TV show with the animators of Adventure Time. Particularly the final episode of this series is really beautiful because it's based on a podcast episode that Duncan Trussell had with his mother. At the time, she was terminal and she was very, very close to passing. And so this final episode came out after she had passed away. And the idea of a very real conversation between a mother and her son about what it's going to mean for her to pass. As we were saying before, there's a line in there where he says, why would we love if it like sucks so bad when it's gone? It's something around those lines, you know. What do you do? Yeah. What do you do when it hurts? And she looks at him and she says 2 words, and they're the 2 most perfect words that I can't believe are unscripted. He says, what do you do when it hurts so bad? And she looks at him and she says, you cry. And I think it's so real that there's nothing else you do. It's pain, and the pain exists, and it's not going to go anywhere. So we can just recognize that it's there. But every episode is essentially like a character going into a simulated universe, and that universe is ending. So every character that's being like interviewed for this podcast is about to meet their end. And so it shows all these different interpretations of death and what it means and how we can experience it. And I think it's very, very profound, much more than you would expect looking at it or watching the trailer for it. So that's my paired cocktail for this. We're going to finish off dessert with a tasty little meal. It's fun, but it also carries the same sort of weight. And it dives into the naivety of youth a little bit as well, but in a way that you wouldn't expect this character to carry the wisdom that she does at her age. This is a film called Are You There, God? It's Me, Margaret. This is one of my favorites from last year, and it's a story of a young girl. Her mother comes from a Catholic family and her father comes from a Jewish family, and neither one of them has put any pressure on her to be religious. If anything, like both of them are from scientific backgrounds now, so they're just kind of like, this is what it is. But at a certain point, she's connected with her family enough that she wants to understand. And so these are conversations that she has with God. She doesn't know which God or who she's talking to. That's where the Are You There, God? It's Me, Margaret. But she goes and she learns about these religions. And as she starts to dive into some of the like going to temple and learning about like her Jewish ancestry, the family's very much being like, oh, you're here now. Let me bring you in more. And same deal with like the Catholic side. And they're kind of pulling at her, which way are you going to go? And it's up to this 9-year-old kid to explain to the adults in the room why is it this way. And she's dealing with this sense of what would we say? Like not so much grief, but like the acknowledgement of like what's going to happen after, and then where am I going to go and what's going to happen. And she's a kid. And this film inspired me so much when I watched it last year. It was so beautiful. And I think it's a perfect film to round out a pretty heavy watch list while still dealing with matters of death and religion and meaning of life. So that's my pick. It's Every Death Everywhere All at Once. We're starting with Guillermo del Toro's Pinocchio. We watch The Seventh Seal and pair that with The Midnight Gospel, either just the last episode or the whole series. And we end the dessert with Are You There, God? It's Me, Margaret. And yeah, you guys can actually let us know in the comments, as we said, which one of these three are your favorites. And if you've seen any of the items on our lists, you know you're going to enjoy The Seventh Seal because they pair together really, really nicely.
That was a good second place. You're right. Damn.
Fuck you.
You're right. Listen, I started off us softball too strong. I understand, guys. Thank you for accepting your lower places on this list. But thanks again to all of our listeners for joining us today, both in chat and afterwards. We are talking to you from the past into the future. 8-time travel grand. And thank you so much for everybody joining us today. I am K, and you can find me at Movie Man Opinions on pretty much anything. So if you guys want to do that, just find me there. And Naf, where can everybody find you?
Absolutely. So as we said, I'm Naf. You can find me via the links in the description as well. But yeah, like I'm at On Second Thought in some places still, and at Seen by Naf in others. I'm working on changing some stuff around and diving more into really trying to make a lot more stuff about all the films that I'm watching. So yeah, you can find me.
It's really cool stuff that he's working on. It's really cool stuff that he's working on. It's true.
Thank you. And to our guests, Tate, thank you so much again for joining us today. Thank you for bringing this film. Like, we're really, really grateful for the conversation and for this little moment in this little pocket of life that we get to share with you. Why don't you let the people know where they can find you and what you're working on, what they can expect to find?
Find me on the TikToks at Star Wars Facts Guy with the 2 little underscores on the side. But I talk about a lot of things. I mean, I try to talk about Marvel, and people didn't like that very much. But so I'm not going to talk about that again. I'm not looking to get shadow banned for another week and a half. But I talk about Star Wars, and I'm covering all the D23 stuff now, just in simple terms. But I'm also at New Zealand International Film Festival at the moment, so I'm going to be dropping a bunch of reviews for films I've seen. I got to drop a review for The Beast. I got to drop a review for Problem Mister. I got to drop a review for Cuckoo, and I've got 5 films next week that I'm going to be watching.
Are you seeing Sing Sing?
No, I don't. I can't.
Damn, but Naf, you are right.
I'm seeing it. Yeah,
got it.
I am seeing a couple of cool things though. Grand Theft Hamlet, which is Hamlet recreated entirely in GTA Online, which is pretty exciting.
No shit, that's awesome.
I need it.
It's 2 guys during COVID who are unemployed actors, and they decided to pull together a cast of people to recreate Hamlet in GTA Online. It's it's an hour 30. So I'm like, hell yeah, that sounds amazing.
That's the shortest version of Hamlet there's ever existed.
We're going to be watching the remarkable life of, I think, Ibelim. I'm not sure how to pronounce the name, but a dude who was, I think, like fully motor controls, none of that from like the waist down. So he spent most of his time playing World of Warcraft. Passed away at 25. His parents went onto his account to just like say a message like, hey, he's passed away now. Millions of people inboxed them saying like how special he was to their lives and how much he was like a part of their role play community. And he was like this. His avatar in the game was like this muscular, like gentle giant, and in real life he was like this frail kid who couldn't even move. And it's kind of about how like the beauty of like games being like a vehicle for people to like explore themselves. I've heard it's like an absolute tearjerker. It hit Sundance. It went like platinum. So I'm really
you got it. What was the name of this one again?
Let me get the proper name. I don't want to butcher the language. The Remarkable Life of Ibelin. It is touring a couple of festivals. Yeah, it is. It sounds incredible. It sounds incredible. I spoke to this woman last night who was sitting next to me during Cuckoo, and she said she saw it the last week and it was so good she's going to go watch it again this week. She's not a dry eye in the theater. So I've got that. I've got Didi, which is a coming of age story about a young immigrant in America growing up in the early 2000s. I've got I Saw the TV Glow Again, which I'm super excited for. My favorite movie of the year. I love horror so much. This isn't even horror. It is something completely different. It is both a wonderful unraveling of the queer struggle of identity and place and where you fit in and where you find yourself. But even then, do not be put off if that's not where you align yourself, because I think the universal idea of regretting steps you didn't take or avenues you didn't follow, and where your life is versus where you want it to be. And I think it's universal, and maybe that's why I also loved it so much, on top of all the amazing subtext. And then I believe I'm watching All We Imagine in the Light, which is about two Indian women in their 40s navigating romance in the city that they live in, but they end up finding a strong sisterhood and friendship with the women in their community. So it sounds super cool, lots of cool stuff, and I will be dropping short and sweet, amazing reviews on all that soon.
Dude,
so lock in.
That sounds awesome.
We gotta do
definitely
more of this shit. Like we gotta get you involved with this, because I'm like, the way you talk about this shit, and the way both of you, like, again, the way that you're passionate and just like how you go and see films and how you engage with it, it's just so great. I think that we should do like a film festival corner or something like that, and be like, bring you on to talk about this stuff and be like these recommendations, because I am riveted by all these films, like, and so again, with both of your guys' recommendations, probably I'll see them by 2026. And so
I just had a look.
yeah.
The Wonderful Life of Evelyn is showing at Melbourne International Film Festival as well. It's showing next week, so I might try and see it. I actually just got a message from my mate that I'm going to MIF with that said, should we buy another 6-pack and go see all the movies he's talking about? And yes, we should. And with that also said, for those of you who can't go to those, it looks like it also is going to be available on Netflix. I don't know if it's available already or if it's not, but it looks like it's at least showing up on Netflix.
Soon, very soon, from what I understand.
Yeah, like I would imagine this from what you're saying. It's like it sounds like it's really picking up, and that's insane. That's incredible.
Hell yeah. Cool. All right, Kay, well, do you want to take us out, my man?
Absolutely, I do. Let's go. And final reminder that you can find all the links to our individual pages in the description below. And there's even a Google form if you want to fill that out, if you have a specific creator or film that you would love to see on our podcast. You can also find One With the Films on Instagram and TikTok and all your favorite podcasting platforms. We do a lot of funny skits, really cool artwork. It's just pretty awesome. You're gonna like it. And so, but for now, as promised, feast your eyes on the next film in the weekly watch list as we mute our mics, and you get to see it.
Oh no! Okay.
See you guys.
Oh, holy shit. Whoa, where am I? Oh, hey. I just had the craziest dream. I dreamt that the film that we were going to watch next week on One With the Films was 2018's Upgrade, starring Logan Marshall Green. It's a really, really cool film with some of the best action sequences you've seen in your entire life. And the dream also told me that I'm the guest. Yeah, so that's exciting. Co-host is the guest. I'll see you next week.